I was fixing a fried laptop in my 9 square meter room when I saw them on TV popping champagne over $4 million. I worked 4 jobs daily to pay their debts, yet I sat there eating cold noodles in the dark while they celebrated without me. When I finally confronted them, Mom sneered that they did not need my pennies anymore. I thought it was the end, until a paralyzed billionaire I nursed secretly rewrote my fate with a will. My name is Savannah James. I am 31 years old, and if you looked at me under the flickering fluorescent lights of the motel bathroom where I currently live, you would probably guess I was 40, maybe 45 on a bad day. I am a white woman from a dust-choked town near Las Cruces, New Mexico. But right now, my entire existence is confined to a 9 square meter room on the outskirts of Albuquerque. The walls are thin enough to hear the trucker next door snoring, and the carpet smells permanently of stale beer and regret. But I do not complain. Complaining takes energy, and energy is the one currency I ran out of a long time ago. My life is a mathematical equation that never balances. It is a cycle designed to crush bone into dust. My alarm does not beep. It screams at 3:30 in the morning. That is when the loop begins. By 4 in the morning, I am already at the loading dock of a wholesale grocery warehouse. The air is freezing, the kind of desert cold that settles into your joints and refuses to leave. My job is to haul crates of frozen vegetables and heavy sacks of flour into the back of a delivery van. I am not built for this. My arms are thin, wire-taut with muscle that comes from desperation rather than the gym. Every time I lift a 50-pound bag of rice, my lower back screams. I grit my teeth and throw it in. I have to be fast. If I am late for the drop-offs, they dock my pay. If they dock my pay, I miss the interest payment. If I miss the interest payment, my parents die. It is that simple. After the delivery shift ends at 8, I do not go home. I drive my beat-up sedan, which rattles like a tin can full of rocks, up to the wealthy hills. This is job number 2. I work as a caregiver for the elderly. This is where I wash bodies that have grown too frail to wash themselves. I spoon-feed oatmeal to people who used to run companies. I change adult diapers. It is grueling, intimate work, but it pays better than the warehouse. I try to be gentle. I try to smile, but sometimes, when I catch my reflection in the pristine glass of their patio doors, I see a ghost. My eyes are sunken, rimmed with purple bruises that no amount of drugstore concealer can hide. I smell like a chemical cocktail of industrial bleach, cheap coffee, and nervous sweat. By 1 in the afternoon, I am peeling off my scrubs in the car and pulling on a polyester blouse that itches. Job number 3 is at a call center downtown. I am a temporary receptionist, filling in the gaps where full-time employees have quit. I sit under lights that buzz like angry hornets and answer phones for 4 hours straight. People scream at me because their internet is down, because their bill is too high, because their life is miserable, and I am the only person paid to listen. I apologize. I type. I take the abuse. I look at the clock every 5 minutes, calculating how many dollars I have earned. Then comes the evening shift, janitorial work. I clean office buildings after the white-collar workers have gone home to their families and their warm dinners. I scrub toilets. I empty trash cans filled with Starbucks cups and half-eaten sandwiches that cost more than my daily food budget. Finally, late at night, when my hands are shaking so badly I can barely hold a screwdriver, I fix computers. I learned to do it back in college, before everything fell apart. It is my side hustle, the cash-in-hand gig that keeps gas in my tank. I sit on the floor of my motel room, surrounded by stripped motherboards and tangled wires, soldering connections with eyes that burn from exhaustion. Last night, I dropped a tiny screw into the shag carpet. I spent 20 minutes looking for it, crawling on my hands and knees, sobbing silently. Not because of the screw, but because I was so tired that my body felt like it was dissolving. I looked at my hands. They were rough, calloused, the nails bitten down to the quick. These were not the hands of a young woman. They were the hands of a machine. I do it all for Mark and Denise, my parents, to the rest of the world. Mark and Denise James are just a couple of unlucky folks from the wrong side of the tracks. To me, they are a black hole. They have been unemployed for as long as I can remember, but that never stopped them from living like they won the lottery. My father, Mark, is addicted to the rush of the gamble, poker, sports betting, scratch-offs. If there is a chance to lose money, he will find it. My mother, Denise, is addicted to things, shiny things, clothes she has nowhere to wear, kitchen gadgets she never uses, jewelry that turns her skin green. They live on credit, on loans, on promises they never intend to keep. And I am their insurance policy. I am the piggy bank that is never allowed to break. I remember the day the world ended. It was 3 years ago. I was 28 then, still clinging to the wreckage of a normal life. I was visiting them for the weekend, trying to ignore the stacks of unopened overdue notices on the kitchen counter. We were eating dinner meatloaf that was raw in the middle because the oven was broken when the knocking started. It was not a polite knock. It was a hammer blow. The entire front door shook in its frame. Mark froze. His fork clattered onto his plate. I saw the color drain from his face, leaving it the color of old ash. Denise just stared at the door, her mouth opening and closing like a fish on dry land. I got up to answer it, but Mark grabbed my wrist. His grip was wet and trembling. "Do not open it, Savannah," he whispered. "Please." But the knocking came again, louder this time, followed by a voice that sounded like gravel grinding in a mixer. "Open the door. Mark, we know you are in there." The door splintered before I could reach the lock. 3 men walked in. They were huge, filling the cramped living room with the smell of leather jackets and violence. The leader had a tattoo of a scorpion crawling up his neck. He looked at my father with a smile that did not reach his eyes. "You are hard to find." "Mark," the man said. He pulled out a chair and sat down backwards, staring at my father. My father was shaking so hard the table vibrated. I just need a little more time," he stammered. "Just a week. I have a big payout coming. A sure thing." The man laughed. It was a dry, humorless sound. "You said that last month, and the month before. The boss is tired of waiting. $60,000. Mark, that is the number. Plus interest. $60,000. The air left my lungs. I looked at my father. 60,000. He had told me he borrowed 2,000 for a car repair. $60,000 was not a debt. It was a death sentence. I stood up. My legs felt like water. But I stood up. "Get out of my house," I said. My voice was thin, terrified, but I forced it out. "I am calling the police." The scorpion man looked at me. He did not look scared. He looked amused. "Go ahead, sweetheart. Call them. But before they get here, ask your daddy where he got the money. Ask him who he borrowed from. The cops do not scare us, but they might be very interested in what your daddy did with that money." Mark started crying. It was a pathetic, heaving sob. He buried his face in his hands. "I am sorry," he wailed. "I am sorry. Savannah, I messed up. They are going to kill me." Then Denise started. She did not cry. She screamed. She threw herself at the scorpion man's feet, grabbing his dusty boots. "Please do not hurt him. We will pay. We will pay every cent. We do not have $60,000. "Mom," I shouted. "We do not have $600. Denise whipped her head around and looked at me. Her eyes were wild, frantic. "But you do. Savannah, you have a job. You are in college. You have a future." I stared at her. I was working part-time at the library to pay for my textbooks. I had nothing. The scorpion man stood up. He pulled a piece of paper from his jacket pocket. It was wrinkled and stained. "Here's the deal," he said. "Mark here is bad credit. He is finished. But you," he pointed a thick finger at me, "you look like a girl who pays her bills. You sign this. You take the debt. We restructure it." I looked at the paper. The numbers danced before my eyes. Principal $60,000. Interest rate 15% per month. 15% a month. That was illegal. That was slavery. "No," I whispered. "I cannot." Mark looked up. His face was wet with tears and snot. "Savannah, please. They will break my legs. They will kill your mother. You are the only one who can save us. You are the smart one. You can figure it out. Please, baby, Daddy loves you." Denise grabbed my shoulders. Her nails dug into my skin. "Savannah, listen to me. You are a good daughter, the best daughter. God gave you to us for a reason. You have to save the family. What kind of child lets her parents die? Sign it. Sign the paper." The room was spinning. The smell of the meatloaf, the men's cologne, the dust, it was suffocating me. I looked at the three men. They were not leaving. I looked at my parents. They were on their knees, begging not for forgiveness, but for me to sacrifice myself. Children must be filial. That was the rule. That was the iron law etched into my bones since birth. I took the pen. My hand shook so violently I could barely hold it. I felt like I was signing my own execution order. I signed, "Savannah James." The Scorpion Man smiled. He snatched the paper back, folded it, and tucked it away. "Good girl. First payment is due on the 1st of the month. Do not be late." They left. The door slammed shut. Mark stopped crying instantly. He wiped his face with his sleeve and let out a long, shaky breath. "Oh, thank God. Thank God. You are an angel. Savannah. A real angel." Denise hugged me, but her embrace felt cold. "See, I told you she would do it. She is a good girl." That night, I did not sleep. I stared at the ceiling, doing the math in my head. 15% of $60,000 was $9,000. $9,000 a month, just for the interest. If I did not pay the principal, the debt would never go down. I dropped out of the University of New Mexico the next morning. I was 3 semesters away from a degree in computer science. I walked into the registrar's office and withdrew. I did not cry. I did not have time to cry. I had to find work. That was 3 years ago. Since then, I have ceased to be a person. I became a machine that converts time into money. I cut everything out of my life. I have no friends. I have no hobbies. I have not bought a new piece of clothing in 36 months. I eat instant noodles for breakfast, lunch, and dinner because a pack costs 35 cents. I moved into this motel because they do not ask for a credit check and the rent is paid weekly. Every cent I earn goes to the interest. Every single cent. I send it to a generic P.O. box in Las Cruces. Sometimes. I manage to pay a little extra to chip away at the principal, but then Mark needs money for his back pain medication, or Denise needs money because the heater broke, or the car broke, or the roof leaked. There is always something. They call me once a week, not to ask how I am, not to ask if I have eaten. They call to remind me of the due date. Remember to transfer the money by Friday. "Savannah," Denise will say, her voice casual, as if asking me to pick up milk. "Your father is stressed. You do not want him to have a stroke. Do you?" "No, Mom." I say, "I will send it." I hung up the phone last night after one of those calls. I was sitting on the floor, surrounded by computer parts, my stomach growling with a hunger that felt like it was eating me from the inside out. I looked at my reflection in the black screen of a broken laptop. I looked old. I looked used up. But I took a deep breath and picked up the soldering iron. I wiped the sweat from my forehead with the back of my greasy hand. "It is okay," I whispered to the empty room. I told myself the lie I have repeated every single day for 1,095 days. Just as long as my parents are okay, I can handle the suffering. I said those words into the silence, truly believing them. I did not know then that those exact words were the bars of the cage I had built for myself. I did not know that my loyalty was not a virtue. It was the weapon they were using to murder me slowly. I did not know that in less than 48 hours, that sentence would be the punchline to the cruelest joke of my life. The rain was coming down in sheets, turning the streets of Albuquerque into slick, black mirrors that reflected the neon signs of the strip malls. I was driving. At least, I think I was driving. My hands were on the wheel. My foot was on the gas pedal. But my mind was floating somewhere 3 feet above the roof of the sedan. I had slept for less than 120 minutes in the last 3 days. I was on my way to deliver a bag of greasy tacos to a stoned college student on the other side of town. It was the last order of the night for the delivery app I ran in the gaps between my other jobs. The smell of the food's stale corn chips and spiced meat was making me nauseous. The heater in my car was broken, blasting air that was somehow hotter than the desert day had been, drying out my contact lenses until they felt like sandpaper against my corneas. I blinked, just a long, slow blink to wet my eyes. When I opened them, the red light at the intersection was not a light anymore. It was a streak of blood-colored paint smeared across the wet windshield. The world tilted sideways. The sound came first, a high-pitched ringing in my ears, louder than the drumming of the rain, then the darkness. It did not come like sleep. Sleep is gentle. This was violent. It was like someone had pulled the power cord out of the wall. My head hit the steering wheel with a dull thud, and the last thing I heard was the blare of a horn from an oncoming truck, a long, angry sound that seemed to stretch out into infinity. Then, nothing. When the world came back, it was white. Blinding, sterile, aggressive white. I tried to sit up, but my body refused to take the order. My arms felt heavy, as if my veins had been filled with concrete. There was a rhythmic beeping sound to my left. Beep, beep, beep. It was the soundtrack of a nightmare. I smelled it before I saw it. Antiseptic, iodine, the sour, metallic scent of sickness and floor wax, hospital, panic, cold and sharp, pierced through the fog in my brain. I tried to speak, but my throat was as dry as the New Mexico dunes. I managed a croak. A face appeared above me. A doctor. He looked tired, his eyes rimmed with red, a coffee stain on his white coat. He shone a penlight into my eyes, and the pain spiked through my skull. "Welcome back," he said. His voice was flat, professional. "You gave the paramedics a scare." "I am fine," I rasped. I tried to pull the IV line out of the back of my hand. "I have to go. I have a shift." He put a hand on my shoulder, pushing me back down. "You are not going anywhere. Miss James, you collapsed at the wheel. Luckily, your car rolled into a curb and not into traffic. Do you know what your resting heart rate was when you came in?" I shook my head. 140, while you were unconscious. He flipped through a clipboard. "You are severely anemic. Your electrolytes are non-existent. You are suffering from extreme exhaustion and malnutrition. We found caffeine levels in your blood that would kill a horse. Listen to me closely. You have a heart arrhythmia. If you keep pushing your body like this, you are not going to faint next time. You are going to go into cardiac arrest. You will die." I stared at him. The words cardiac arrest and die floated in the air. But they did not land. They did not scare me. Death was abstract. Death was quiet. What scared me was the clock on the wall. It was Tuesday morning, 10 o'clock. I was supposed to be at the Halstead estate 2 hours ago. I was supposed to be at the call center in 3 hours. I missed the warehouse shift. I whispered. My voice trembled. I missed the delivery. The doctor sighed, rubbing the bridge of his nose. "You almost died, and you are worried about work. You do not understand," I said, tears pricking at the corners of my eyes. "I cannot stay here. I do not have insurance. How much is this going to cost the ambulance? The room? How much?" "We can discuss payment plans later," he said, dismissing my terror with a wave of his hand. "Right now, you need rest. We have contacted your emergency contacts, Mark and Denise James." My heart hammered against my ribs. "You called my parents?" "Yes. We told them you were in the emergency room. We told them it was serious." I laid back against the thin, scratchy pillow. A strange sensation washed over me. Relief, mixed with shame, but mostly relief. They knew. They would come. They would see me lying here, hooked up to machines, pale as a sheet, and they would finally understand. They would say, "Stop, Savannah. It is enough. We will figure it out. Just get better." Mark would drive down in the truck. Denise would bring me soup. They would be parents. Just for one day. I waited. The doctor left. The nurse came in to change the fluid bag. She looked at me with pity. "Is anyone coming for you, honey?" "Yes," I said, my voice firm. "My parents. They live 2 hours away." They are coming. 24 hours passed. I stared at the door. Every time it opened, my breath hitched. Every time it was just a nurse, or a janitor, or a doctor, my chest tightened a little more. I started making excuses for them in my head, a mental script I had perfected over 3 years. The truck probably would not start. Mark has been meaning to fix the starter. Maybe they did not hear the phone. The reception is terrible out by the old highway. Maybe Mom is sick. She gets those migraines. Maybe they are on their way right now and there is traffic. 48 hours passed. The hospital was a public one, crowded and noisy. I was moved from the emergency room to a ward with 3 other beds. The woman next to me had broken her hip. Her entire family was there, 3 generations crammed into the tiny space, bringing flowers, balloons, sneaking in homemade cookies. They laughed. They held her hand. I pulled the curtain around my bed, creating a small white cocoon of isolation. I ate the tasteless hospital jello and stared at the ceiling tiles, counting the little dots. 1,402 dots. I checked my phone. It had been dead when I arrived. But a nurse had lent me a charger. No missed calls, no texts. Just an email from the warehouse manager. You are fired. Do not bother coming back for your check. We will mail it. And an automated message from the bank. Your account balance is below $20. On the morning of the 3rd day, the phone rang. The screen said, Mom. My hand shook as I swiped to answer. A lump formed in my throat, so big I could barely breathe. They had called. Finally. Mom, I whispered. Savannah Denise's voice was loud, crackling with static. Where are you? The hospital called the house phone 3 times. Do you know how annoying that is? I'm still in the hospital. Mom, I said, I almost died. The doctor said my heart. Yeah. Hearts. Denise cut me off. Listen, I hope you did not put us down as the ones responsible for the bill. We do not have money for fancy doctors. Savannah, you have to handle that yourself. I closed my eyes. A single tear leaked out, hot and stinging. I know. Mom, I will handle it. Good, she said. And hey, speaking of handling things, since you are just lying there, do not forget the transfer is due on the 30th. That is in 2 days. You cannot be late this month. Mom, I just lost my warehouse job, I said, desperation creeping into my voice. I have been in a hospital bed for 3 days. I have not earned a cent. Silence on the other end, then a sigh. A loud, exaggerated sigh of disappointment. Well, you figure it out. Savannah, you always do. Your father is hurting bad. His back is killing him. He needs to go to the chiropractor, and that is not cheap. If you do not send the money, he is going to suffer. You want your father to suffer while you are laying in bed resting. She called it resting. I looked at the IV tube in my arm. I looked at the bruise spreading dark purple across my forearm where the needle had slipped. I felt the hollow ache in my chest where my heart was skipping beats. No, I said, I do not want him to suffer. Good girl, Denise said. Fix it. Talk to you later. The line went dead. I lowered the phone slowly. The silence in the room was deafening. The woman with the broken hip was laughing with her grandson on the other side of the curtain. I sat there, frozen. It was not a sudden explosion of anger. It was something colder. It was the sensation of the ground finally falling away beneath my feet. I had spent 3 years setting myself on fire to keep them warm. I had sold my future, my health, my dignity. And to them, I was not a daughter. I was not a person. I was an ATM. I was a bank account that could breathe. If I died, they would not cry because they lost me. They would cry because the checks would stop coming. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. I curled up on my side, clutching the phone to my chest, and stared at the white wall. I was entirely, completely alone. If I died right now, the only person who would care was the billing department of the hospital. The phone vibrated in my hand again. I flinched. I did not want to answer. I thought it might be Mark, calling to guilt me about his back, or maybe a bill collector who had already found me. But the name on the screen was not Dad. It was Mr. Halstead. Graham. I hesitated. I was supposed to be at his house every morning at 7. I had missed 3 days. He was probably calling to fire me too. He was a billionaire. He was used to things running like clockwork. He had fired 5 caregivers before me for minor infractions, being 5 minutes late, making the tea too hot, humming too loudly. I wiped my face and answered. "Hello, Mr. Halstead," I said, trying to steady my voice. "I am so sorry. I know I missed my shifts. I can explain. Please do not." "Kid." His voice was rough, trembling with age and the aftermath of the stroke that had taken the use of his legs. But it was not angry. "Kid, shut up for a second," he said. I fell silent. "Where are you?" he asked. "The agency said you did not show up. They said you quit." I told them you would never quit without telling me. "Where are you?" "I am in the hospital, Mr. Halstead," I said. There was a pause. I could hear the hum of the oxygen machine he used in the afternoons. "Which one?" he asked. "Memorial General." "Are you dying?" No, I do not think so. Just exhausted." "Good," he grunted. "Because if you died on me, I would have to sue you for breach of contract." A laugh bubbled up in my throat. It was a watery, broken sound. But it was a laugh. "I am sorry I worried you." I said, "I was not worried." He lied. His voice was gruff, but I could hear the tremor in it. "I just did not want to break in a new nurse. You know how I hate strangers touching my things." "Yes, sir." "Are they feeding you?" he asked suddenly. "Hospital food?" I said, "It is edible. It is garbage," he snapped. "Listen to me. Do not hurry back. You hear me? If you come back here looking like a ghost, I will not let you in the gate. You stay there until the doctors kick you out." "But the money," I started. "I will still pay you for the days." He interrupted. "Sick leave. Do not argue with me. I have more money than God, and I can do what I want." Tears welled up again. But these were different. They were not the hot, acidic tears of shame I had shed for my mother. These were warm. "Thank you," I whispered. "Hey," Graham said softly. "Yes. Are you okay?" The question hung in the air. Simple. 3 words. "Are you okay?" My mother had not asked it. My father had not asked it. The people who gave me life, who shared my DNA, who had taken everything from me, they had not asked. But this 82-year-old man, a man known for being a ruthless corporate shark, a man paralyzed and trapped in his own body, a man I had only known for 6 months, he asked, "No," I choked out. "No, I am not okay." "Then you rest," he said gently. "You rest. Kid, we will be here when you are ready." He hung up. I held the phone against my ear long after the connection broke. Outside, the rain had stopped. A thin sliver of sunlight was piercing through the blinds, cutting across the sterile white sheets. For the next 4 days, Graham called every day. He did not call for long. He would call at noon. "What did you eat today?" he would ask. "Oatmeal." I would say, "Disgusting. Get better so I can have the chef make you a steak." He would grumble. He would call at night. "Did you sleep a little? Sleep more. The world will not fall apart if you close your eyes for 8 hours." He told me brief, fragmented stories about his day. He complained about his son, Victor, visiting and looking at the paintings as if appraising them for an auction. He complained about the physical therapist hurting his shoulder. He asked if I had seen the game shows on the hospital TV. He never asked for anything. He never demanded. He just checked in. It was a small thing, a tiny, fragile thread of connection. But in that cold, crowded hospital room, where the silence of my own family rang in my ears like a scream, Graham Halstead's voice became the only thing anchoring me to the earth. I lay in bed, listening to the monitor beep a steady, rhythmic sound now, no longer a frantic warning, and I realized something terrifying and beautiful. The man paying me to wipe his chin cared more about my life than the people I was killing myself to save. And for the first time in 3 years, as I drifted off to sleep without setting an alarm for 3:30 in the morning, I felt something other than exhaustion. I felt seen. I remember the first day I drove up the winding, sun-bleached road to the Halstead estate. It was 6 months before my collapse in the hospital, back when I still thought I could outrun the exhaustion. The house sat on a ridge overlooking the red dust of the Santa Fe outskirts, a sprawling structure of glass and steel that looked less like a home and more like a spaceship that had crash-landed in the desert. The gate was 12 feet tall and made of solid iron. When it slid open automatically, sensing the transponder the agency had mailed me, I felt a knot of anxiety tighten in my stomach. I drove my rusted sedan up the driveway, the engine sputtering in embarrassing contrast to the silence of the desert. To my left, an infinity pool stretched out toward the horizon, its water so still it looked like a sheet of blue glass. To my right, a garage housed cars that cost more than my parents' entire existence. But inside that palace of wealth, I found a tomb. The air conditioning was set to a bone-chilling 68 degrees. The silence was heavy, broken only by the hum of expensive appliances. And there, in the center of a living room the size of a basketball court, sat Graham Halstead. He was 82 years old. He was paralyzed from the waist down, the result of a stroke 2 years prior. He sat in a high-tech wheelchair that probably cost as much as a house, staring up at the vaulted ceiling with eyes that were not dead, but furious. He did not look at me when I walked in. He just stared at a spot on the plaster. "You are late," he rumbled. His voice was like grinding stones. I looked at my watch. "I am 5 minutes early." "Sir?" "You breathe too loud," he countered, finally snapping his head toward me. "The last one chewed gum. The one before that smelled like wet dog. What is your defect going to be?" I stood my ground, gripping the strap of my canvas bag. "My defect is that I need this job, Mr. Halstead, and I have a lot of debt. So I'm going to put up with you being mean because I cannot afford to get fired." He narrowed his eyes. The wrinkles on his face deepened. He looked at me for a long, uncomfortable minute. Then he huffed, a sound that might have been a laugh or a cough. "We will see," he said. I learned later that I was the 6th caregiver in 4 months. The others had quit in tears or been fired for incompetence. Graham Halstead was not an easy man. He was meticulous to the point of madness. He wanted his pillows arranged at exactly 45-degree angles. He wanted his water at room temperature, not cold, not warm. He wanted the curtains drawn at exactly 6 in the evening. But I stayed. I stayed because the pay was $25 an hour. And $25 an hour meant I could pay the interest on the loan shark debt without having to skip meals every single day. Slowly, the transactional nature of our relationship began to shift. It happened in the quiet moments. It happened in the physical intimacy of caregiving. There is no dignity in being paralyzed. You lose the ability to hide your vulnerabilities. I had to lift him. I was small, but I was wiry and strong from hauling boxes at the warehouse. I would slide my arms under his frail shoulders and behind his knees, counting to 3 before hoisting him from the bed to the chair. 1, 2, 3, up we go. "Graham," I would say, straining against his dead weight. He hated it. I could feel his body tense up, his pride warring with his necessity. But I was gentle. I never rushed. I learned how to adjust his legs so his circulation would not cut off. I learned how to comb the thin white hair back from his forehead without scratching his scalp. One morning, while I was spoon-feeding him a bowl of bird's nest soup, something that cost $200 a bowl and tasted like nothing to me, he looked at me. "Why do you hum?" he asked. I froze, the spoon hovering near his mouth. "I am sorry. I did not realize I was doing it." "Do not stop," he said grumpily. "It covers up the sound of the clock ticking. I hate that clock." "What is the song?" "It is just an old country song," I said, George straight. "My dad used to listen to it before. Sing it," he commanded. I laughed nervously. "Mr. Halstead, I cannot sing. I sound like a dying cat. I am half deaf anyway," he said. "Sing the damn song, kid." That was the first time he called me kid. So I sang. I stood there in the sunlight, holding a bowl of expensive soup, and sang Amarillo by morning in my cracked, tired voice. I missed half the notes. My pitch was terrible. But Graham closed his eyes and leaned his head back, his fingers tapping a faint rhythm on the armrest of his chair. Not bad. He mumbled when I finished. Better than the silence. From that day on, the afternoons changed. Instead of him staring at the ceiling and me staring at my phone, we would position his wheelchair by the massive floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out over the desert. The New Mexico sunset is a violent thing. It paints the sky in bruises of purple and bleeding reds. We would watch the sun go down, and he would talk. He told me about building Halstead Life Sciences from a garage lab in the 70s. He told me about the patents he wrote, the deals he struck, the enemies he made. But mostly, he talked about the loneliness of the summit. I have 3 children. Savannah. He told me one evening, his voice low. Victor, Serena, and David. Do you know when the last time David called me was? I shook my head. Christmas. He said, 2 years ago, and that was to ask if I had updated my trust fund structure. He looked at his hands that were twisted with arthritis, hands that had once signed checks for millions of dollars, but now could not even hold a fork steady. They look at me and they do not see a father, he said bitterly. They see a walking bank vault. They are just waiting for the combination to click so they can loot the place. I adjusted the blanket over his legs. Maybe they are just busy, I suggested, echoing the excuses I made for my own parents. No, he snapped. Do not be naive. Kid, busy is a lie people tell to avoid the truth. The truth is, I was a hard father. I was absent. I chose work over them. And now, they are choosing my money over me. It is a transaction. He turned his head to look at me, his blue eyes sharp and piercing. You know what I learned, he asked. Poverty is ugly. I grew up poor. I know what it is like to be hungry. But poverty is not as scary as success. Poverty cannot betray you. When you are poor, you know who your friends are. When you are rich, you are surrounded by sharks who smile with human teeth. Being stabbed in the back by a stranger hurts, but being stabbed in the back by the people you trust, that kills you before you are even dead. His words hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. I felt a lump rise in my throat. I tried to swallow it down, but I was so tired. I had just come from a double shift at the call center. My feet were throbbing. My phone had buzzed 3 times in the last hour text from Denise reminding me that the electricity bill was due. I turned away, pretending to organize the medicine bottles on the side table. Kid Graham asked. I did not answer. A sob escaped me. It was a small, pathetic sound. He maneuvered his electric chair closer. What is it? Did someone hurt you? I shook my head, tears spilling over my cheeks. I could not stop them. The dam I had built for 3 years finally cracked. It is just, I sobbed. I am so tired. Graham, I am just so tired. And then I told him. I sat on the expensive Persian rug at his feet, and I told him everything. I told him about the day the men with the scorpion tattoo came to the house. I told him about Mark hiding behind the kitchen table while I signed my life away. I told him about the 15% interest rate. I told him about the nights I slept in my car because I did not have gas money to get back to the motel. I told him about fainting on the bus last week and waking up on the floor with people stepping over me because they thought I was a junkie. I told him about the text messages. Send more. Dad hurts. Mom needs a new dress. Don't be ungrateful. I poured it all out, vomiting up the shame and the anger I had swallowed for so long. When I finished, silence filled the room. I wiped my face with my sleeve, terrified to look at him. I thought he would judge me. I thought he would tell me I was stupid for signing that paper. I thought he would tell me it was my duty, just like everyone else did. But when I looked up, Graham was not looking at me with judgment. He was looking at me with a profound, aching sadness. He reached out his shaking hand and placed it on my arm. His skin was like dry parchment paper, warm and fragile. Savannah, he said softly. I sniffled. Yes, listen to me, he said. His voice was steady, stronger than I had heard it in months. Blood makes you related. Loyalty makes you family. The people who gave birth to you aren't necessarily your family. The words hit me like a physical slap. But they are my parents, I whispered. I have to save them. No, Graham said firmly. You are not saving them. You are enabling them, and they are eating you alive. A parent is supposed to cut off their own arm to feed their child. They are cutting off your arm to feed their vices. That is not love, kid. That is parasitism. I pulled away, standing up. It was too much. It was the truth, and the truth burned. I have to get back to work, I said, my voice trembling. I have to clean the bathroom. Graham did not push. He just watched me. But after that day, things changed. He became a watcher. He started noticing the small details I tried to hide. When lunch was served, he would ring the bell for the chef. Cook, he would say. This soup is too salty. I cannot eat it. Pack it up for the girl, and throw in some of those rolls. And a steak. I want a fresh one tomorrow. He knew the soup was fine. He knew I was starving. I would take the Tupperware containers home to my motel, and for the first time in years, I ate real protein instead of instant noodles. He started asking me to organize his vitamin drawer. These are expiring next month, he would lie, pointing to bottles of high-quality multivitamins, iron supplements, and fish oil. Throw them out, or take them. I do not care. Just get them out of my sight. I took them. Within 2 weeks, the purple circles under my eyes began to fade slightly. My hair stopped falling out in clumps in the shower. One evening, I fell asleep in the chair next to his bed while reading him the newspaper. I simply drifted off, my body shutting down. I woke up an hour later, panicked. I'm sorry, I gasped, jumping up. I fell asleep. I have to drive home. I have the night shift. Graham was watching me from the bed. No, he said. You do not. What I called your night shift, he said calmly. I told them you quit. You what? My heart stopped. Mr. Halstead, I need that money I paid you for the shift, he said. Look in your bag. I opened my canvas bag. There was an envelope inside. $500 in cash. And you are not driving, he added. My driver, Marcus, is waiting downstairs. He will take you to your motel. You are going to sleep in a bed, not crash your car into a ravine. But go, he ordered, before I fire you for arguing. I went. I sat in the back of the Rolls-Royce, crying silently as the leather seats warmed my back. It was a strange, terrifying feeling. For 31 years, I had been the one taking care of everyone else. I did not know how to be taken care of. I did not know how to accept kindness without looking for the hook, the price tag attached to it. But with Graham, the price tag never appeared. A few weeks later, right before the accident that landed me in the hospital, we were sitting by the window again. The sky was a deep, bruising purple. Graham was in a reflective mood. He had been looking at old photos of his children, his face unreadable. He turned to me. Savannah, he said. Yes, Graham. You are a good kid. You have a spine of steel, but steel breaks if you bend it too far. I smiled weakly. I am okay. Graham, I will survive. He looked at me, and for a moment, the fog of age seemed to clear completely from his eyes. He looked sharp, dangerous, like the CEO he used to be. If one day, he said, his voice low and raspy, if one day those vultures pick you clean, if the world turns its back on you, I want you to remember something. What is that? I asked, arranging the blanket over his knees. Remember that you always have a rude, crippled old man standing on your side. He said, even if you cannot see me. I laughed. It was a light, genuine laugh. Oh, Graham, you are not that rude. He did not smile. He looked at me with an intensity that made the hair on my arms stand up. I am serious. Kid, he said, I can move mountains from this chair. Never forget that. I patted his hand, thinking he was just being sentimental, thinking he was just an old man raging against the dying of the light. Okay, Graham, I said, I will remember. I did not know then that he was not speaking metaphorically. I did not know that while I was scrubbing his floors and singing him country songs, he was already moving the pieces on a chessboard I could not even see. I did not know that he was preparing a weapon for me, one that would destroy my enemies and save my life. I just thought he was being kind. I was wrong. He was not just being kind, he was being a father. The father I never had. I walked out of the hospital 3 days later. My legs felt like they were made of damp cotton, and my bank account was lighter by $2,000, thanks to the deductible and the ambulance ride. The doctor had given me a stern lecture about stress management and sleep hygiene, handing me a pamphlet with a smiling woman doing yoga on the cover. I threw it in the trash can outside the emergency room doors. Yoga does not pay interest rates of 15%. Yoga does not keep 3 loan sharks from breaking my father's kneecaps. I went back to work. I had lost the warehouse job. So I picked up extra hours at the call center and started doing freelance data entry at night. It was less physically demanding, but it paid less. I calculated my budget down to the penny. If I skipped lunch every day and turned off the heat in my motel room, I could still send Mark and Denise their monthly tribute. I was terrified that while I was in the hospital, they had missed a payment. I was terrified the men with the scorpion tattoos would come back. I was stupid. I was so incredibly stupid. 2 weeks after my discharge, I was sitting in my car outside the call center. It was 9 o'clock at night. I was eating a granola bar for dinner, the dry oats scratching my throat. I had just transferred $600 to my parents, my entire paycheck for the week. Then my phone started to buzz. It was not a call. It was a notification, then another, then a cascade of them, pinging rapidly like a slot machine paying out. Facebook Live. Denise James is live. Notification. You were tagged in a photo by Mark James. Notification. High school class of 2012 group. Did you guys see this? Savannah's parents. My stomach dropped. I thought they were dead. I thought the loan sharks had finally decided that money was not enough and had made an example of them. My hands trembled so hard, I dropped the granola bar into my lap as I unlocked the screen. I opened the live stream. The video was shaky, the audio blown out by distortion, but the image was clear enough. There was my father, Mark. He was standing on the hood of his truck. In one hand, he held a bottle of champagne that looked expensive. In the other, he held a giant cardboard check, the kind they give you on television. The number written on it was $4 million. I stared at the screen. I blinked, sure that the exhaustion was making me hallucinate, but the image remained. Mark was screaming something unintelligible. Denise was beside him, laughing, throwing confetti into the air. The caption beneath the video read, "God finally showed mercy. We are rich. New chapter starts now." $4 million. They had won the lottery. I sat in my dark, cold car, the engine idling, and waited for the phone to ring. I waited for Mark to call and say, "Baby, we are saved. You can stop working now. You can go back to school. We can pay off the debt." I waited 5 minutes. 10 minutes. The live stream comments were scrolling by faster than I could read. "Congratulations. Drinks on you. Amazing." My phone remained silent. I dialed Mark. It went to voicemail. I dialed Denise. It rang 4 times before she picked up. "Hello," she shouted. I could hear music thumping in the background. Loud, bass-heavy music. "Mom, it is me," I said. My voice sounded small, pathetic. "Mom, is it true?" "Oh, Savannah." She sounded breathless, distracted. "Yeah, can you believe it? Your father bought a scratch-off at the gas station. $4 million. Can you imagine? That is amazing. Mom," I stammered, "I am so happy for you. When did this happen yesterday?" She laughed. "We just got the check today. Look, I cannot talk right now. The whole neighborhood is here. We are popping bottles. Yesterday. They knew yesterday. I had transferred $600 money I needed for rent an hour ago. They had $4 million, and they let me send them my grocery money." "Mom, wait," I said. "Can I come over?" "I want to celebrate with you." There was a pause, a hesitation that felt like a knife in my gut. Sure," Denise said, her voice cooling slightly. "If you want, but it is getting late. Maybe come tomorrow." I hung up. I did not go back to the motel. I put the car in gear and drove. It was a 2-hour drive to the town where I grew up, a dusty, forgotten place near Las Cruces. I drove with a singular, burning focus. I did not feel the fatigue anymore. I felt a strange, vibrating energy, a mix of hope and dread. Surely, they were just overwhelmed. Surely, in the excitement, they had forgotten to call. Surely, once I got there, they would hug me and tell me the nightmare was over. I pulled onto their street just after 11 o'clock. Usually, the street was dark, the streetlights broken, the houses huddled in shadow. Tonight, it looked like the Las Vegas Strip. My parents' house, a single-story ranch with peeling paint and a sagging porch, was unrecognizable. Strings of LED lights were draped over every bush, every tree, every inch of the gutter. A massive speaker system was set up in the driveway, blasting electronic dance music that shook the windows of the neighbors' houses. There were cars parked everywhere. People were spilling out of the front door. Onto the lawn, I saw faces I recognized. Mrs. Gable from next door, who used to threaten to call the police on us when Mark argued too loudly. Mr. Henderson, the grocer who had banned Denise for writing bad checks. They were all there, holding plastic cups, laughing, eating shrimp from a massive tower set up on a folding table. I parked my car down the block because there was no room in the driveway. I walked toward the house. I was still wearing my call center clothes, a wrinkled button-down shirt and cheap black slacks. On my arm, a piece of medical tape still covered the spot where the IV had been. I looked like a specter haunting a feast. I walked up the driveway. No one stopped me, but no one greeted me either. People glanced at me, their eyes sliding over me like I was a piece of furniture. They were too busy looking at the center of the party. Mark was holding court by the cooler. He was wearing a new leather jacket that still had the creases from the store. He was telling a story, his face flushed with alcohol, and I tell the guy. I say, "Keep the change," Mark roared, and the circle of sycophants laughed. I stepped into the circle. "Dad." Mark stopped laughing. He looked at me. His eyes were glassy, unfocused. "Savannah," he said. He did not smile. He did not open his arms. "You made it." I looked around. I saw the expensive seafood. I saw the cases of champagne. I saw the brand new 60-inch television box sitting by the trash cans. They had spent thousands of dollars in a single day. "Dad," I said, my voice trembling. "You won." "Yeah, we won," Mark said, puffing out his chest. "About time." "Right, about time. The universe paid me back for all my hard work. Your hard work." I swallowed the bile rising in my throat. "Where is Mom inside?" He gestured with his beer bottle, showing off the jewelry. I pushed past him and went into the house. The living room was crowded. The air smelled of expensive perfume and cheap beer. Denise was sitting on the old, stained sofa, but she looked like she was dressed for a gala. She was wearing a sequined dress that was too tight, and around her neck was a diamond necklace that glittered aggressively under the harsh ceiling light. "Mom," I said. She looked up. Her makeup was heavy, hiding the lines of worry I had memorized over the years. For a second, she looked annoyed. Then she put on a plastic smile. "Oh, look who is here," she announced to the room. Our daughter finally decided to show up. I walked over to her. The music was pounding in my head. "Mom," I tried to call. "You did not answer. We are busy." "Savannah," she said, taking a sip of wine. "We have guests." I looked at the guests. Strangers, neighbors, people who did not care about them yesterday. "Mom, can we talk privately?" I asked. Denise rolled her eyes. "Just say it here. We have no secrets from our friends." I took a deep breath. I felt every eye in the room on me. "Okay," I said. I wanted to ask. Now that you have the money, now that you are safe," I paused, my heart hammering. "Can you help me pay off the debt?" I asked softly. "The $60,000, the loan sharks, the interest. I have been paying it for 3 years. Mom, I am drowning. If you could just pay the principal, I could go back to school. I could start over." The room went silent. Someone turned down the music. Denise stared at me. Her expression did not soften. It hardened. Her eyes became like flint. She set her wine glass down on the table with a sharp clink. "Excuse me," she said. Her voice was ice cold. "You come into my house, on the happiest night of our lives, and the first thing you do is ask for money." I blinked, stunned. "Mom, it is not asking for money. It is your debt. I signed it for you, to save Dad's legs." Remember Mark appeared in the doorway. He had heard. He pushed through the crowd, his face red with rage. "Watch your mouth," he bellowed. He pointed a shaking finger at me. "My debt. I raised you. I put clothes on your back. I fed you for 18 years. And now you count pennies with your own father, Dad. I am not counting pennies." I cried, tears springing to my eyes. "It is $60,000 I have paid, over $100,000 in interest. I almost died last week, working to pay your debt." "You ungrateful brat," Mark screamed. He grabbed a vase from the table and threw it on the floor. It shattered, the sound like a gunshot in the silent room. "We finally catch a break. We finally get a chance to enjoy life. And you want to drag us back down. You want to take our money." I looked around the room. I looked at the neighbors. I expected someone to step in. I expected someone to say, "Hey, Mark, she is your daughter. She helped you." But they didn't. They looked at me with disgust. I was the buzzkill. I was the greedy child trying to steal from the lucky winners. "She just wants a handout." Someone whispered near the kitchen. "Kids these days," another muttered, "always have their hand out." Denise stood up. She smoothed her sequined dress. She looked at me not with anger, but with a chilling indifference. She looked at me like I was a stain on her new carpet. "You heard your father," she said calmly. "We do not owe you anything. Savannah, you did what a daughter is supposed to do. That is over now. But the debt is still in my name," I pleaded. "The men, they will still come for me." "Then pay them," Denise said. "You are young. You can work. We are old. We deserve this money. We are not giving you a dime to throw away on your mistakes." My mistakes. I stepped back. The room seemed to tilt. The faces of the people around me distorted into grotesque masks of judgment. "So that is it," I whispered. "I am just nothing to you." Denise stepped closer. Her perfume was overpowering. "From now on," she hissed, low enough so only I could hear, "we do not need your pennies anymore. We do not need your whining. Get out of my house. And do not go around telling people you are our daughter. We are wealthy now. We do not need a failure like you embarrassing us." She turned her back on me. "Mark, pour more champagne," she shouted, throwing her hands in the air. The music blasted back on. The bass thumped against my chest like a physical blow. Mark cheered. The neighbors cheered. I stood there for a moment longer, a solitary figure in a crumpled uniform, surrounded by a sea of celebration. I looked at the parents I had sacrificed my youth for. They were not looking at me. They were looking at the lottery check. I turned around and walked out. I walked past the shrimp tower. I walked past the cooler of beer. I walked out the front door, down the driveway lined with flashing LED lights. Behind me, I heard laughter. I heard glasses clinking. "Get out of here," someone yelled from the porch. I reached my car. My hands were shaking so badly I dropped my keys in the dirt. I fell to my knees to find them. I grasped the cold metal in the dark, and a sound escaped my throat, a raw, guttural animal noise of pure agony. I scrambled into the driver's seat and locked the doors. I sat there, gasping for air, watching the silhouette of my father dancing in the window of the house I grew up in. They were drinking to their good fortune, and their good fortune was built on the ashes of my life. I started the engine. I did not look back. I drove out of the town, the glow of their party fading in the rearview mirror until it was just a speck of light in the vast, indifferent darkness of the desert. I was alone, but this time, the loneliness was different. It was not the absence of people, it was the absence of hope. I realized, as I merged onto the empty highway, that the loan sharks were not the ones who had destroyed me. My parents had done that, and they had done it with a smile. 3 days later, I drove back. I told myself it was because I needed closure. I told myself that the alcohol had been speaking, not them. People say terrible things when they are drunk, right? Maybe they had woken up the next morning with hangovers and regret. Maybe they were waiting for me to come back so they could apologize. The street was quiet. The LED lights were gone. The music was gone. The house was dark. There was a sign in the front yard, a wooden stake driven into the dry earth. For sale. Sold. I parked the car. I walked up the driveway. The front door was unlocked. It swung open with a rusty creak that echoed in the silence. The house was gutted. They had taken everything. The television was gone, leaving a dusty rectangle on the wall where it had hung. The sofa was gone. The refrigerator was gone. Even the cheap plastic fan that used to rattle in the corner of the living room was gone. They had stripped the place like locusts. I walked into the kitchen. The linoleum floor was scuffed and dirty. The only thing left in the entire house was the old wooden dining table, the one where I had sat 3 years ago and signed my life away. On the center of the table sat a single object, a thick manila folder, bound with rough twine. I walked over to it. My footsteps sounded loud and heavy in the empty room. I untied the string. My fingers were cold, clumsy. I opened the folder. It was a graveyard of paper, bank statements, loan agreements, credit card bills, gambling IOUs. I flipped through them, my breath catching in my throat. Savannah James, Savannah James, Savannah James. Every single document bore my name. But the signatures, some were mine, shaky and coerced. But others were forgeries. Clumsy attempts at my handwriting on credit card applications I had never seen. Loans for furniture I had never sat on. Cash advances I had never touched. The dates went back years. Before the scorpion tattoo men, before I dropped out of college. They had been using my identity since I turned 18. I looked at the total. It was not $60,000 anymore. With the new discoveries, the hidden debts, the compounded interest, it was closer to $120,000. On top of the stack sat a piece of lined notebook paper, a note, scrawled in Denise's looping. Chaotic handwriting. You are a big girl now. Handle it yourself. Do not look for us. We are gone. Good luck. I stared at the note. Good luck. Like she was signing a yearbook, I dropped the paper. It fluttered to the table, landing on top of a foreclosure notice from 2 years ago that I had saved them from. I did not scream. I did not throw the table. I sat down on the floor, right there in the empty kitchen, surrounded by the ghosts of my childhood, and I laughed. It started as a dry, hacking sound in my chest. Then it rose, higher and louder, bouncing off the bare walls. I laughed until my throat felt like it was bleeding. I laughed until tears streamed down my face, hot and blinding. It was the laughter of someone who had fallen off a cliff and realized, halfway down, that there was no bottom. They were gone. They had taken the $4 million. They had taken the furniture. They had taken the memories, and they had left me with the bill. They had erased me. I sat there for an hour, maybe 2. The sun moved across the floor, stretching the shadows of the window bars until they looked like a prison cell. Then, the laughter stopped. Silence returned. But this silence was different. It was heavy. Yes. But it was also clear. For 3 years, my life had been a frantic, desperate race to keep them afloat. Every waking moment had been dedicated to their survival. Now, they were gone. I looked at the folder. I picked it up. I did not have to send them $600 this week. I did not have to answer their calls. I did not have to worry about Mark's back or Denise's moods. I still had the debt. I still had the chains. But the dead weight of 2 adults hanging off my neck that was gone. I stood up. I dusted off my pants. I took the folder. I walked out of the house. I left the door wide open. Let the wind have it. Let the dust have it. It was not my home anymore. It never had been. I drove back to my motel. I sat at the small desk, spread the papers out, and I made a plan. I did not sleep that night. I called the numbers on the papers. Hello. This is Savannah James. I'm calling about the debt. I did not cry. I did not beg. I negotiated. I cannot pay the full amount this month. I can give you $200. Take it or leave it. If you sue me, I will declare bankruptcy and you will get nothing. I did not sign this card. but I will pay the principal if you freeze the interest. Otherwise, report it as fraud. I was ruthless. I was cold. I was fighting for my life. By dawn, I had reduced the monthly payments by 30%. It was still a mountain, but it was a climbable mountain. The next morning, I went to the Halstead estate. I looked different. I felt different. I had lost 5 pounds in 3 days. My cheekbones were sharp, cutting against my skin. My eyes were hollow. Graham was in the garden, watching the koi fish in the pond. He looked up when I approached. He studied me for a long time. He did not ask where I had been. He did not ask why I looked like a skeleton. He just asked one question. How are they? I stopped pushing his wheelchair. I walked around to face him. I looked him in the eye. I do not have parents anymore. Graham, I said. My voice was flat. No emotion, just a fact, like stating the weather. He looked at me. He did not look surprised. He did not offer empty platitudes. He did not say I am sorry or they will come around. He nodded slowly, a sharp, decisive nod. Good, he said. I blinked. Good, yes, he said. Now you can live like an adult human being, instead of a broken ATM machine. He turned his gaze back to the fish. Push me to the library, he commanded. I want to read. That was it. No pity. Just permission to move forward. The following week, I quit the warehouse. I quit the cleaning job. I quit the delivery app. I kept the job at the call center for the steady check. But I started applying for real jobs. Jobs that used my brain, not just my back. I dusted off my old resume. I relearned code at night instead of fixing broken laptops for pennies. I got an interview at Brightspan Systems, a mid-sized IT firm in downtown Albuquerque. I walked in wearing a suit I bought from a thrift store. I sat across from the hiring manager, a woman with kind eyes, and I told her the truth, not about the debt, but about my skills, about my hunger. I will work harder than anyone you have ever hired. I told her, because I have to. She hired me, junior systems analyst, $45,000 a year, benefits, health insurance. It was not a fortune, but it was steady. It was a 9 to 5. It meant I could sleep at night. I moved out of the motel. I rented a small studio apartment. It had a real kitchen. It had a window that did not look out onto a parking lot. My life became quiet, orderly. I went to work. I went to Graham's in the mornings before my shift and on weekends. I paid my debts. But inside, I was hollow. I went through the motions of living, but I felt like a shell. The anger had burned itself out, leaving behind a vast, scorched landscape of indifference. I did not date. I did not make friends. I just existed. Graham saw it. He saw the way I stared off into space. He saw the way I never smiled unless I forced it. One evening, about 6 months after the parents left, I was at the estate. It was raining. Graham was meeting with his lawyer, Jonah Pierce. Jonah was young for a lawyer, maybe in his late 30s, with sharp eyes and a serious demeanor. I was in the kitchen, making tea, but the door to the study was ajar. I heard whispering. Is it done? Graham asked. His voice was weak. He was getting weaker every day. Yes. Mr. Halstead, Jonah said. It is drafted exactly as you wanted, but I have to warn you again. This will cause a war. Let them have a war. Graham growled. They like wars. What about her? Jonah asked. Is she ready for this? I paused, the kettle in my hand. Graham was silent for a long moment. I peeked through the crack in the door. He was looking toward the kitchen. He could not see me, but he was looking right at where I stood. His eyes were filled with a strange mixture of fierce protection and deep sorrow. She has to be, he whispered. It is the only way out. Jonah nodded and put a document into his briefcase. He snapped the lock shut. The sound was loud in the quiet room. I stepped back, my heart racing. What were they talking about? What war I brought the tea in? Graham smiled at me. That rare, genuine smile that crinkled the corners of his eyes. Thank you, kid, he said. He took the cup. His hand shook, spilling a little tea on the saucer. Jonah looked at me. He looked at me for a long time, an unreadable expression on his face. Then he nodded politely and left. Graham sipped his tea. "Savannah," he said. "Yes. Graham, read to me. Read The Old Man and the Sea." I sat down and opened the book. I read aloud about the fisherman and his struggle. Graham closed his eyes, listening to the rhythm of my voice. I did not know it then, but he was listening to his own eulogy, and he was preparing me for the storm that was about to break. Winter came to the high desert early that year. It brought a biting wind that rattled the glass panes of the Halstead estate and turned the red sand into frozen, iron-hard earth. Inside the house, the temperature remained a constant, climate-controlled 72 degrees, but Graham Halstead was feeling a cold that no furnace could touch. His decline was not a slide, it was a cliff. In the weeks following his conversation with Jonah Pierce, Graham seemed to shrink into himself. The tremors in his hands, once manageable, became violent earthquakes that spilled his tea and made holding a pen impossible. He spent more time asleep than awake, his breathing ragged and shallow, assisted by a sleek oxygen machine that clicked and hissed like a dying clock. His memory began to fray at the edges. Some days, he would call out for his late wife, asking if she had watered the roses. Other days, he would look at the stock ticker on the television and bark orders to sell companies that had not existed since the 80s. But there were moments lucid, terrifyingly sharp moments when the fog lifted. One afternoon, I was adjusting the nasal cannula on his face. His skin was paper-thin, translucent enough to see the blue veins pulsing weakly beneath. I was humming Amarillo by morning under my breath, a habit I had not been able to break. Suddenly, his hand shot out. It was weak, cold, but his grip on my wrist was firm. "Stop," he rasped. I froze. "Did I hurt you?" "Graham," he opened his eyes. The milky film of age and medication was gone. His irises were a piercing electric blue. They were the eyes of the man who had built an empire from nothing. "Savannah, look at me." I stopped fussing with the tubes. I looked at him. "I am looking at you." "Graham, do not let them eat you," he whispered. His voice was barely audible over the hum of the machine. "When I am gone, do not let them eat you. You are not food. You are the hunter. Do you understand?" I frowned, confused. "Who?" "Graham, the vultures, everyone," he said. He squeezed my wrist, his fingers digging into my skin. "Promise me. You stand tall. You look them in the eye. You are Savannah James. You survived the fire. Do not burn in the smoke. I promise," I whispered, though I did not fully understand what he was asking. He held my gaze for a second longer. Then his eyes drifted shut, and his hand went limp. The grip loosened. He was asleep again. He stopped calling me kid after that. Every time he woke up, he would say my name, Savannah, as if he was trying to imprint it onto the walls of the house before he left. The end came 3 days later. I drove up the hill at 6:30 in the morning. The sky was a bruised purple, the sun struggling to break over the Sangre de Cristo Mountains. Usually, the iron gates were closed tight, requiring me to punch in my code. Today, they were standing wide open. A cold stone dropped into my stomach. I drove up the winding driveway, my tires crunching on the gravel. The front door was ajar. I parked the car and ran inside. The silence of the house was absolute. It was not the quiet of sleep. It was the vacuum of absence. In the hallway, I found Maria, the housekeeper. She was sitting on the bottom step of the grand staircase, her face buried in her apron, her shoulders shaking. "Maria," I asked, my voice trembling. She looked up. Her eyes were swollen. "He is gone. Mihija," she sobbed. "He went at 3 in the morning. The night nurse said he just stopped." I walked past her. I walked into the bedroom on the first floor. The bed was empty. The sheets had been stripped. The oxygen machine was turned off. Silent. Graham was gone. I did not cry. Not then. I stood in the center of the room where I had spent the last 6 months of my life, and I felt a profound, echoing hollowness. The only person on this earth who had seen me, truly seen me, had left. I was an orphan again, not by blood, but by soul. The funeral was held 4 days later. It was less a memorial and more a press conference. The service took place at the largest cathedral in Santa Fe. It was a spectacle of white lilies and hypocrisy. There were senators there. There were tech moguls. There were cameras flashing behind the police barricades, trying to get a shot of the grieving billionaire dynasty. I parked my sedan 3 blocks away to avoid the valets parking Bentleys and Ferraris. I walked to the church in the biting wind. I was wearing a black suit I had bought at a thrift store for $12. The sleeves were slightly too long, and the fabric shined under the lights in a way that screamed polyester, but it was the best I had. I sat in the very last row, tucked behind a marble pillar. I watched them walk in. Victor Halstead led the procession, Graham's eldest son. He was a heavy man, his face flushed with the permanent redness of expensive scotch and high blood pressure. He dabbed at his eyes with a silk handkerchief, but I could see him checking his watch every 2 minutes. He looked bored. He looked like a man waiting for a meeting to end so he could get to the buffet. Serena Halstead followed. She was striking. I had to give her that. Platinum blonde hair cut in a sharp bob. Wearing a black dress that probably cost more than my entire college education. She was clutching a diamond-encrusted clutch bag like a weapon. She was not crying. She was scanning the room, noting who was there, tallying the social capital in the pews. They sat in the front row, the grieving children. I listened to the eulogies. A business partner spoke about Graham's vision. A politician spoke about Graham's generosity. Victor got up and mumbled something about a tough father but a great leader. No one talked about how he liked his toast burnt. No one talked about how he hummed along to George Strait. No one talked about the way he stared out the window at the sunset, terrified of dying alone. They were burying a checkbook, not a man. After the service, as the crowd shuffled out toward the reception at the country club, an event I was certainly not invited to, I found myself trapped in the vestibule, waiting for the crowd to thin. I was invisible to them. I was just another face in the background, maybe a distant cousin or a former employee. I heard Victor's booming voice from around the corner. "I am telling you, the market is going to react well," he was saying. "I have the liquidators ready for the estate. I am not keeping that drafty old museum. I am selling the land to developers. Whatever." Serena's voice cut in, sharp and icy. "You can have the dirt. I want the beach house in Malibu and the portfolio, and I am firing that lawyer. Pierce, he is too stiff. We need someone who understands creative accounting." "Creative accounting?" Victor snorted. "Just make sure we get the appraisal done before the tax cycle. I want my share in the offshore accounts by January." They were dissecting him before his body was even cold. I felt a wave of nausea so strong I had to grab the wall to steady myself. I pushed through the heavy oak doors and out into the cold air. I ran to my car. I sat there, gripping the steering wheel, and finally, I let myself cry. I cried for the lonely old man who had been right about everything. A week passed. I went back to work at Brightspan. I typed code. I answered emails. I went home to my empty apartment. I expected nothing. Graham had paid me well for my time. He had given me a severance package of 2 months' wages in cash before he died. That was enough. I was grateful. Then the phone rang. It was Tuesday morning. I was at my desk, debugging a server script. "Miss James." The voice was familiar, cool, professional. "Yes, this is Jonah Pierce, Mr. Halstead's attorney." My heart jumped. "Mr. Pierce. Hello? Is something wrong? Did I forget to return a key?" "No," Jonah said. "Nothing is wrong. I am calling to inform you that the reading of Mr. Graham Halstead's last will and testament will take place tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock. Your presence is required." "Required," I repeated. "Why you are named in the will." "Miss James." I sat back in my chair. Named in the will. He probably left me a book, or maybe that old coffee mug I used to drink from, or maybe a small bonus, like $1,000 to help with rent. "Okay," I said. "I will be there." The law offices of Pierce Associates were located on the 40th floor of the tallest building in downtown Albuquerque. The lobby smelled of leather and intimidation. I took the elevator up, my ears popping as the numbers climbed. I was wearing my thrift store suit again. I had tried to iron it, but the creases were stubborn. When the elevator doors opened, a receptionist with a headset directed me to conference room A. I walked down a hallway lined with modern art that looked like violent splashes of paint. I pushed open the heavy glass door of the conference room. The room was freezing. At the head of a long mahogany table sat Jonah Pierce. He had a stack of documents in front of him and a pitcher of ice water. On one side of the table sat the Halstead clan, Victor, Serena, and two other people I recognized from the funeral grandchildren. Maybe. They were laughing, talking loudly about a ski trip to Aspen. When I walked in, the laughter stopped. It was instant, like someone had cut a power cord. Serena turned in her swivel chair. She looked me up and down, her eyes lingering on my scuffed shoes. "Excuse me," she said, her voice dripping with disdain. "The service entrance is in the back. We are in a meeting. When I was told to come here," I stammered. Victor laughed. It was a cruel, barking sound. "Come here for what?" "To empty the trash." "You are the nurse, right?" "The one who changed his diapers." I felt the blood rush to my face. I stood straighter. I gripped my bag. "I am Savannah James." I said, "Mr. Pierce called me." Jonah looked up from his papers. He did not smile. "Please, have a seat." "Miss James," he said, gesturing to the empty chair on the opposite side of the table. "You are in the right place." Victor's face darkened. He looked at Jonah. "What is this? Why is the help here? Did Dad leave her a tip? Cut her a check and get her out. I have a flight to catch at 2. Graham requested she be present for the reading. Jonah said calmly, "It is mandatory. Please, sit down." I walked to the chair. It felt like walking a mile. I sat down. I was alone on my side of the table. Facing me was a wall of hostility. Victor was glaring. Serena was looking at her phone, bored. Jonah cleared his throat. He picked up the heavy document. "We are here to read the last will and testament of Graham Edward Halstead." He began. The room settled. The greed in the air was palpable. It had a taste, metallic and sour. Jonah went through the standard clauses first. "To my son, Victor Halstead. I leave the family estate in Santa Fe, along with the antique car collection and 30% of the voting shares in Halstead Life Sciences." Victor smirked. He leaned back, crossing his arms. Finally, he muttered, "To my daughter, Serena Halstead. I leave the property in Malibu, the art collection, and 30% of the voting shares in Halstead Life Sciences." Serena checked her nails. "Fine," she whispered. "To my grandchildren. I leave the trust funds established in 2010 to be accessed upon their 25th birthdays." The grandchildren nodded, looking at their phones. Jonah listed charities. He listed board members. He listed minor bequests to longtime staff members, $5,000 to the gardener, $10,000 to the chef. Victor drummed his fingers on the table. Okay, we get it. He was a saint. Is that it? Can we sign the papers?" Jonah paused. He turned a page. The paper rustled loudly in the silence. He looked up. He looked directly at me. "There is one final article," Jonah said. His voice changed. It became sharper, more deliberate. "Article 19. He read, "Regarding the liquid assets and the remainder of the private investment portfolio." Victor sat up. That was the cash. That was the big money. "I, Graham Halstead, being of sound mind and body, hereby leave the sum of 10 million United States dollars, Victor grinned. Serena leaned forward. "To Savannah James." The silence that followed was not empty. It was heavy. It was the silence of a bomb that had landed but not yet detonated. Victor froze. His mouth hung open. Serena dropped her phone. It hit the glass table with a crack. I stopped breathing. I stared at Jonah. I thought I had misheard. I thought he had said 10,000. 10 million, I whispered. Jonah nodded. $10 million, along with a personal letter, to be delivered immediately. Then, the room exploded. What Victor roared. He slammed his fist onto the table so hard the water pitcher rattled. "What did you just say?" Serena shot out of her chair. She pointed a manicured finger at me. her face twisting into a mask of fury. "You are joking." "This is a joke. Write $10 million. To her, to the maid." "It is not a joke," Jonah said, his voice calm and steady against their screaming. "It is the will. It is witnessed, notarized, and ironclad." "You are lying," Victor shouted. He stood up, his face turning a dangerous shade of purple. He walked toward Jonah. "She did this. She brainwashed him. He was senile. He did not know what he was doing. She probably drugged him and made him sign it. Sit down." "Mr. Halstead," Jonah warned, his eyes hard, "or I will have security remove you." "You are a thief," Serena screamed at me. She lunged across the table. "You dirty little thief. You preyed on a dying old man. You slept with him, didn't you? That is it. You slept with my father." I pressed myself back into the leather chair. I was shaking. Not from excitement, from terror. The hate coming off them was a physical wave. They looked like they wanted to tear me apart with their bare hands. "I did not know." I stammered. "I did not know anything about this. Liar." Victor bellowed. "Look at her. Look at her cheap suit. She has been planning this. She is a con artist." Jonah stood up. He was tall, and he projected an authority that finally cut through the noise. "Enough," he shouted. The room fell into a vibrating, angry silence. "The will is valid," Jonah said coldly. "Mr. Halstead was evaluated by 3 independent psychiatrists on the day he signed this. He was sound, he was clear, and he was specific." He picked up a thick white envelope from the table. He walked around the edge and handed it to me. "Miss James," he said gently, "this is for you." I took the envelope. It was heavy. My name was written on the front in Graham's shaky, spider-scrawl handwriting. Victor stared at me. His eyes were full of a dark, murderous promise. "This is not over," he hissed. "You will not see a penny of that money. I will bury you in court. I will ruin you. You hear me? You are dead." I clutched the envelope to my chest. I looked at the man who had just inherited an empire and was threatening to destroy a woman who made $45,000 a year. And in that moment, I heard Graham's voice in my head. "Savannah, look at me. Do not let them eat you." I took a deep, trembling breath. I looked Victor in the eye. "I did not ask for this," I said, my voice shaking but audible. "But if Graham gave it to me, it is mine." Serena let out a shriek of rage. Jonah moved between us. "Meeting adjourned," he said. "Miss James, please come with me to my office. We have paperwork to sign." I stood up. I walked past the Halstead family. I could feel their eyes burning holes in my back. I walked out of the glass room, clutching the envelope that had just put a target on my back the size of New Mexico. The war Graham had predicted had begun, and I was the only soldier on the battlefield without a weapon. Or so I thought. The silence in the conference room lasted exactly 3 seconds before it was detonated by Victor Halstead's fist hitting the mahogany table. It was a violent, animalistic sound, the kind of noise that makes your primitive brain scream, "Run." The crystal water pitcher jumped, splashing ice onto the expensive legal documents. "You are out of your mind," Victor roared. His face, already flushed, turned a deep, alarming shade of crimson. He spun toward Jonah, pointing a trembling finger that looked more like a weapon than a hand. "You are telling me my father left $10 million to the help, to the woman who wiped his ass." He did not wait for an answer. He whirled on me. I shrank back into the leather chair, feeling the physical heat of his rage. "You did this." He spat, spittle flying from his lips. "You manipulated him. You saw a lonely, dying old man, and you sank your claws in." "What did you do? Did you drug him? Did you whisper poison in his ear while he was sleeping?" I shook my head, my voice trapped somewhere in my chest. "I never asked for anything." "Oh, spare me the innocent act," Serena shrieked. She was standing now, her perfect posture gone, replaced by the hunched aggression of a predator. "You are a predator. That is what you are. A gold-digging, bottom-feeding predator. You think you can walk in here in your thrift store suit and walk out with our inheritance?" "It is not your inheritance," Jonah said. His voice was calm, but it had a steely edge that cut through the screaming. It was Graham's money, and he decided where it went. "It is undue influence," Victor bellowed, slamming the table again. He was senile. He did not know what day of the week it was. "Actually," Jonah interrupted, sliding a thick file across the table. "I anticipated this reaction. Graham anticipated it too. That is why we took precautions." He tapped the file. "Inside this folder are 3 separate affidavits from 3 independent geriatric psychiatrists, certifying that Graham Halstead was of sound mind, clear memory, and full capacity on the day he signed this codicil. Furthermore, the entire signing process was recorded on video. In the video, Graham explicitly states his reasons for this bequest. He states, quite clearly, that he is doing this because Savannah James was the only person in the last 5 years who treated him like a human being rather than an investment portfolio." The room went deadly silent. Serena stared at the file as if it were radioactive. Victor looked like he was about to have a stroke. "We will sue," Victor whispered, his voice shaking with a terrifying quietness. "We will tie this up in probate for 20 years. We will drain every cent of that 10 million in legal fees before you see a dime. We will bury you. You little thief." Jonah stood up. He buttoned his jacket. "You can try, Mr. Halstead. But the will is ironclad, and if you contest it, the video goes public. Do you really want the shareholders to see what your father really thought of you?" Victor's jaw clenched. He looked at me with eyes that were black with hate. "Get out," he hissed at me. "Get out of my sight before I do something I will regret." I stood up. My legs felt like jelly. I grabbed the envelope Jonah had given me, the letter from Graham, and I walked to the door. I could feel their hatred on my back, a physical weight, heavy and suffocating. I took the elevator down 40 floors. I did not breathe until I stepped out into the cold winter air of downtown Albuquerque. I had $10 million to my name, and I had never felt more in danger in my life. I drove home, checking my rearview mirror every 10 seconds, convinced that Victor's black SUV was following me. By the time I got to my apartment, the story had already broken. I do not know how they did it so fast. Maybe they had a reporter on speed dial. Maybe they leaked it the second I walked out the door. I opened my phone to check the time, and my newsfeed was already flooded. Billionaire's shocking will nurse takes millions. The $60 an hour heiress, did she seduce dying tycoon? Graham Halstead. I clicked on a link from a popular tabloid site. My stomach turned over. They had found a picture of me, an old photo from my college ID, where I looked young and tired, and photoshopped it next to a picture of Graham in his wheelchair. The caption read, "The caregiver who cared too much. Family alleges brainwashing." I scrolled down to the comments. I should not have done it. Graham had warned me, but I could not look away. User 782. Classic scam. Find a lonely old guy. Flash a smile. Get the bag. Truth seeker. She probably switched his meds. Someone should investigate her. Albuquerque native. I saw her at the grocery store once. She looks like trash. No way she got that money legally. The hashtag Savannah James scammer was trending on Twitter. I turned off my phone. I threw it on the bed as if it were a venomous snake. I sat in the corner of my tiny room, my knees pulled up to my chest, and watched the light fade from the window. I thought the money meant freedom. I thought it meant I could finally breathe. But Graham was wrong. It was not a key. It was a cage. The next morning, I had to go to work. I debated calling in sick, but I needed the normalcy. I needed to believe that my life at Brightspan Systems was still real, that I was still just a junior analyst and not the most hated woman in New Mexico. I walked into the office at 8:30. Usually, the office was a hum of quiet typing and coffee machine chatter. When I walked in, the silence rippled out from the door like a shockwave. Heads turned. People I had eaten lunch with yesterday looked at me and then quickly looked away. I heard whispering. That is her. $10 million. Why is she even here? I kept my head down. I walked to my cubicle. Someone had taped a photocopy of the tabloid article to my monitor. I ripped it down, my hands shaking, and threw it in the trash. I sat down and tried to type, but I could feel their eyes. I could feel the judgment radiating from every corner of the room. At 2 in the afternoon, the internal messaging system pinged. "Please come to the director's office." I knew what was coming. Mr. Henderson was a nice man. Usually, he was a middle-aged guy who coached his son's soccer team and brought donuts on Fridays. But when I walked into his office, he would not meet my eyes. "Sit down, Savannah," he said, gesturing to the chair. I sat. "Look," he started, rubbing the back of his neck. "You are a great employee. Your code is clean. You work hard." But I asked, "But the phone has been ringing all morning." He sighed. "Reporters, angry people on the internet. They are review bombing the company because you work here. They are saying we employ well. They are saying things." He looked up at me, his face pained but resolute. "We are a client-facing business. Savannah, we rely on trust, and right now, the publicity surrounding you, it is a liability we cannot afford. The board called me an hour ago. They want you gone." I stared at him. "I just got this job. Mr. Henderson, I did nothing wrong. It is an inheritance. It is legal. I know," he said, "and I am sorry, truly, but I have to let you go. We will give you 2 weeks' pay in lieu of notice. Please pack your things." I walked out of the building carrying a cardboard box with my mug and a few succulents. I stood on the sidewalk, unemployed again. The irony was bitter like ash in my mouth. I was technically a multimillionaire, but I had no job, no liquid cash because the probate would take months, maybe years, and now, no reputation. I went back to my apartment, my sanctuary, my 9 square meters of safety. I locked the door. I engaged the deadbolt. I put the chain on. I closed the blinds. For the next 3 days, I lived like a fugitive. I ate canned soup because I was afraid to go to the grocery store. I kept my phone off because every time I turned it on, the notifications were a torrent of abuse. People had found my email. They had found my old high school photos. They were dissecting my life, looking for dirt, looking for proof that I was the monster the Halstead said I was. I started to jump at every sound. A car backfiring made me dive to the floor. Footsteps in the hallway made my heart hammer against my ribs. Then came the night of the rain. It was Thursday. A cold, miserable desert storm was battering the city. The rain lashed against my window like gravel. It was 11 at night. I was lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the wind howl. Then, there was a knock. It was not a polite knock. It was not the pizza guy. It was a heavy, rhythmic pounding. Thud, thud, thud. The whole door frame shook. I froze. I stopped breathing. "Savannah." A voice roared from the hallway. "Open the door." I knew that voice. I had heard it at the funeral. I had heard it making crude jokes about the catering. It was Caleb Halstead, Victor's son, the one with the neck tattoos and the reputation for bar fights that Graham used to complain about. I crept off the bed. I tiptoed to the door, my bare feet silent on the cold linoleum. I pressed my eye to the peephole. He was there. He was soaking wet. His hair was plastered to his skull. He was wearing a leather jacket, and his eyes were wild, bloodshot, manic. He looked like violence personified. He pounded the door again. I saw the wood flex. "I know you are in there." "You little rat," he screamed. "Open up." I did not move. I did not speak. He kicked the door. Dust fell from the frame. "Listen to me," he yelled, pressing his face close to the wood. I could hear his heavy breathing through the door. "You have 1 week. You hear me? 1 week to sign the papers refusing the inheritance." He paused, and his voice dropped to a low, guttural growl that was infinitely scarier than the shouting. "If you do not," he hissed, "we are going to come back, and we are not going to knock. We are going to make you wish you had died in that hospital bed last year. You think 10 million is worth your life? Do you?" He hawked and spat. I heard the wet slap of saliva hitting the door right at my eye level. 1 week. Savannah TikTok. He kicked the door one last time, a parting shot that rattled the chain lock. Then I heard his heavy boots stomping away down the hall. I heard the stairwell door slam. I slid down the wall. My legs simply ceased to function. I hit the floor hard, pulling my knees up, wrapping my arms around my head. I tried to breathe, but my throat was closed. I gasped. A dry, heaving sound. Then the nausea hit me. I scrambled on hands and knees to the tiny bathroom and retched into the toilet. My stomach was empty, so nothing came up but bile and fear. I sat on the bathroom floor, shivering uncontrollably. They were not just going to sue me, they were going to hurt me. I looked at the bathtub. I thought about climbing in and pulling the shower curtain closed. I felt like a child again, hiding from the men with the scorpion tattoos. But this time, there was no Mark to hide behind. There was no Denise to scream. There was just me. Me and $10 million that I could not touch. Me in a city that wanted me dead. I curled into a ball on the bath mat, the smell of bleach and mildew filling my nose, and for the first time since Graham died, I wished he had not left me anything. I wished he had just left me alone, because poverty was hard. Poverty was exhausting. But this was terror. I lay on that cold bathroom floor for hours. The smell of mildew and cheap tile cleaner filled my nose, grounding me in the pathetic reality of my existence. Caleb's spit was still drying on the other side of my front door. His voice, a guttural growl promising violence, echoed in the cramped space of the studio apartment. I was terrified. It was a primal, animalistic fear that made my teeth chatter and my stomach clench into a tight, painful knot. I wanted to run. I wanted to call Victor Halstead right now, this second, and tell him he could have it. He could have the $10 million. He could have the stocks. He could have the legacy. I just wanted to live. I just wanted to go back to being invisible. I crawled out of the bathroom. My hand brushed against my canvas bag, which I had dropped by the door when I came home. It was heavy. Inside, buried under a lint-covered sweater and a notepad, was the white envelope Jonah Pierce had handed me at the reading. I had not opened it. I had been too afraid. I had felt like an imposter, a thief just like they said I was. I felt that if I opened it, I would find a mistake. Or worse, I would find a note from Graham telling me this was all a joke, a final cruel prank to teach me a lesson about greed. But now, with the threat of death hanging in the hallway, I had nothing left to lose. I sat with my back against the wall, right under the window I had nailed shut. I tore the seal. The paper was thick, expensive, the kind of stationery that costs more than a meal. I unfolded the letter. The handwriting was familiar. It was shaky. The letters formed with the jagged, trembling lines of a man fighting his own nervous system, but the ink was pressed down hard into the paper. There was no hesitation in the words. My dear Savannah, if you are reading this, then I am gone, and if I know my family, and unfortunately, you are currently going through hell. They are calling you names. They are threatening you. They are telling the world you are a monster. I am sorry for that. I am sorry I have to put you in the line of fire. But it was the only way. I wiped a tear from my cheek. My hands were shaking so hard the paper rattled. You probably think I left you this money because I was fond of you. You were the first person in 10 years to look at me and see a man. Not a bank vault. But that is not why I did it. I did it because I know about the debt. My breath hitched. I froze. I know about Mark and Denise. I know about the $60,000. I know about the second loan. I know about the gambling. I have to confess something. Kid, about 4 months ago, I hired a private investigator. I wanted to know why a smart, capable young woman was working 4 jobs and wearing shoes with holes in the soles. I wanted to know where your money was going. The report broke my heart. I saw the public records. I saw the coercion. I saw 2 parasites feeding off a host. And then, I saw them win the lottery. I gasped aloud in the empty room. He knew. He had known about the lottery before he died. I watched them. Savannah. My investigator sent me photos of the party. I saw the new truck. I saw the jewelry. And I saw them cut you off. I saw them throw you away like a used wrapper. That was the night I called Jonah. I realized something. You are trapped. You are trapped by your own loyalty. You are trapped by a system that rewards selfishness and punishes kindness. If I just gave you a job, you would send the money to them. If I gave you a small gift, they would take it. So I had to give you a weapon. This money is not a reward. Savannah, it is a nuclear option. It is the only thing big enough to sever the cords that bind you to your past. It is the key to your freedom, but freedom is expensive. You have to fight for it. If they are smearing you, if they are lying about us, then my plan is working. It means they are afraid. They know that if you have this power, they cannot control you anymore. Do not be afraid. I did not send you into this battle naked. I have given Jonah everything. The video logs, the medical records, the diaries I kept since the stroke, every conversation where Victor wished I would hurry up and die. Every time Serena asked if I was lucid enough to sign a check, it is all there. I read the next lines through a blur of tears. You do not owe me anything. Savannah, you wiped my chin when I could not feed myself. You sang to me when I was scared of the dark. We are even. Do not pay me back by bowing to them. Do not let them make you small again. Stand tall, kid. You are a Halstead now. Not by blood, but by spirit. And we do not run. Your friend, Graham. I lowered the letter. I sat there in the silence, but the room felt different. The shadows did not feel so oppressive. The dread that had been crushing my chest began to lift, replaced by a slow, burning heat. He had known. He had seen the truth of my parents, the ugly, rot-filled reality I had tried to hide from the world, and he had not judged me. He had been angry for me. He had orchestrated this. He had known Caleb would come. He had known Victor would scream, and he had bet $10 million that I was strong enough to take it. If I signed those papers Caleb wanted, if I gave the money back just to stop the fear, I would be proving Graham wrong. I would be proving that I was just a victim, that I was just a doormat for powerful people to wipe their feet on. I stood up. My legs were steady. I walked to the bathroom and washed my face. I scrubbed the vomit from my mouth. I looked at myself in the cracked mirror. I looked tired. I looked terrified. But under the fear, I saw something else. I saw the steel Graham had talked about. I am not running. I whispered to the reflection. I grabbed my phone. I turned it on. It buzzed instantly with 100 hateful notifications, but I ignored them. I dialed a number. Jonah answered on the first ring. Are you safe? He asked immediately. His voice was tight with worry. I am safe, I said. But Caleb was here. He threatened me. I am sending a security detail to your apartment, Jonah said. Do not open the door for anyone. No, I said. I am coming to you. We need to talk. I met Jonah an hour later, not at the high-rise office with the glass walls, but at a small, nondescript satellite office in a strip mall on the edge of town. The blinds were drawn. The only light came from a desk lamp and the glow of computer screens. Jonah looked exhausted. He had bags under his eyes, and his tie was loosened. But when I walked in, he looked at me, really looked at me, and nodded. You read the letter, he said. I nodded. I sat down across from him. I pulled the crumpled envelope from my pocket and placed it on the desk like a badge of honor. He knew. I said, he knew everything. He did. Jonah agreed. He opened a drawer and pulled out a black external hard drive. He slid it across the desk toward me. This is the insurance policy, he said. What is on it? I asked. Everything, Jonah said. Graham started recording video diaries 3 years ago, right after his stroke. He knew his children would challenge his capacity if he ever tried to cut them out. So he documented every single day. He documented his doctor's visits. He documented the conversations he had with Victor and Serena. Jonah plugged the drive into his laptop and turned the screen toward me. He clicked a file dated 6 months ago. The video player opened. There was Graham. He was sitting in his wheelchair by the window, the red desert sunset behind him. He looked frail. Yes, but his eyes were sharp. He was holding a newspaper. Today is October 14th, Graham said to the camera. His voice was clear. I just had a visit from my son, Victor. He spent 20 minutes complaining that I have not died yet because he wants to sell the Santa Fe land to a casino developer. He did not ask how I was. He did not bring me a glass of water. He just checked the expiration date on his inheritance. Graham leaned into the camera. Then Savannah came in. She looked like she had been hit by a truck. She has been working 4 jobs. She brought me soup from a deli because she knows I hate the chef's broth. She sat with me for an hour and read me the sports section. She does not want my money. She just wants someone to talk to. That is the difference. That is why she gets it. The video ended. I stared at the black screen. Fresh tears stinging my eyes. It proves he was lucid, Jonah said softly. It proves he knew exactly what he was doing. And it proves their narrative that you manipulated a senile man is a lie. So what do? I asked. Do we sue them? Jonah leaned back. If we sue, it stays in court. It stays sealed. Meanwhile, they destroy you in the press. They have already painted you as a villain. We need to change the story. How we do not use PR firms, Jonah said. We do not use spin doctors. We use the truth. We release the videos, not all of them, just enough. We let Graham speak for himself. I hesitated. It felt private. It felt like exposing him. But then I remembered Caleb at my door. I remembered the hashtag Savannah James Scammer. Do it, I said. We spent the next 3 hours selecting clips. We chose moments that showed Graham's wit, his sharpness, and the genuine warmth between us. We avoided the angry rants about his children for now. We focused on the humanity. At 3 a.m, we uploaded the first video to a new social media account simply titled The Truth About Graham. It was a 60-second clip. In it, Graham was laughing a deep, wheezing laugh because I had tried to sing a high note in a country song and failed miserably. You sound like a dying coyote. Kid, he said in the video, his eyes crinkling. I am doing my best. Graham, my voice replied from off camera. I know, he said, suddenly serious. You always do. That is why I trust you. We posted it with a simple caption. He chose, I am just keeping the promise. Then we waited. By the time the sun came up, the video had 10,000 views. By noon, it had 1 million. The comments began to shift. User 442. Wait, he looks totally lucid here. He is sharp. Watcher 99. I thought the family said he was a vegetable. He is roasting her singing. That is hilarious. Just asking if she was a scammer. Why would she post this scammer's hide? She is showing receipts. It was not a tidal wave, but it was a ripple. The monolithic hate that had been directed at me began to crack. People started asking questions. An independent journalist from a digital news outlet messaged the page. She wanted to know about the claims that the Halstead children had neglected him. She had found old records of safety violations at the private care facility they had tried to put him in years ago. Jonah handled the press. I handled the anxiety. My phone buzzed again. It was a text from an unknown number. You think a video saves you? You are playing with fire. We know where you sleep. My hands shook as I read it. Caleb. I looked at Jonah. He was on the phone, arguing with a producer from a morning news show. His voice firm and authoritative. I showed him the text. He hung up the phone. He looked at the message. Then he looked at me. He did not look scared. He looked angry. We are filing a restraining order today, he said, and we are sending a copy of this text to the police. And then, we are going to send a screenshot of it to Victor's lawyer. He stood up and walked around the desk. He put a hand on my shoulder. It was a heavy, grounding weight. You are not alone in this. Savannah, he said, Graham hired me to protect his legacy. You are his legacy. We will fight them to the end. I looked at him. For the first time in my life, I had a teammate. I was not the girl standing in front of the loan sharks while my father hid under the table. I was not the girl crying in the hospital while my mother asked for money. I was Savannah James. I had $10 million, a lawyer who was ready for war, and the ghost of a billionaire on my shoulder. Let them come, I thought. I typed a reply to the unknown number. Come and get me. But smile for the camera. I hit send, and then I turned back to the work of clearing my name. The steps of the Rio Mesa Superior Court looked like a red carpet event for the damned. It was 9 a.m. on the day of the trial. The air was crisp. but the heat coming from the mass of bodies gathered at the entrance was suffocating. There were cameras everywhere. Satellite trucks lined the street, their dishes pointed at the sky like hungry mouths, waiting to catch the first word of the verdict. I stepped out of Jonah's car. I was wearing the same thrift store suit I had worn to the funeral, but I had pressed it until the lines were sharp enough to cut glass. I kept my chin up. Graham's voice was a loop in my head. "Stand tall. You are the hunter." Flashbulbs popped in a blinding staccato rhythm. Reporters shouted my name, throwing questions like jagged stones. "Savannah. Is it true you seduced him? Savannah. What do you say to your parents?" "Miss James, are you going to jail?" I did not flinch. I did not look at them. I walked up the marble stairs. Jonah, a solid, silent presence beside me. Inside, courtroom 4 was packed. The gallery was full of onlookers, bloggers, and distant relatives of the Halstead family hoping for a spectacle. On the left side, the plaintiff's table, sat the Halstead dynasty. Victor looked like a bull ready to charge, his neck straining against his collar. Serena was dressed in black, looking like a grieving widow rather than a daughter who had not visited her father in 2 years. They had a team of 5 lawyers, men in suits that cost more than my car, but it was the people sitting behind them that made my breath stop. Mark and Denise. My parents were sitting in the front row of the gallery, directly behind Victor. Denise was wearing a new dress, something gaudy with a floral print. Mark was looking at his shoes. They were not looking at me. They were sitting on the side of the people trying to destroy me. I sat down at the defense table. My hands were cold, but I placed them flat on the wood. I would not let them see me shake. The bailiff announced the arrival of the Honorable Judge Elena Cortez. She was a woman in her 50s with steel-gray hair and eyes that looked like they could spot a lie from a mile away. She sat down, adjusted her robes, and looked at the circus before her. "Let us begin," she said. Her voice was calm, cutting through the murmur of the room. The Halstead's lead attorney, a man named Sterling who had a reputation for shredding witnesses, stood up. He did not waste time. "Your Honor," he began, pacing in front of the jury box, "this case is simple. It is a case of a predator and prey. The predator is sitting right there. Savannah James, a woman with a history of financial instability, a woman who was desperate. She found Graham Halstead, a man in the twilight of his life, a man suffering from physical and mental decline, and she isolated him. She poisoned his mind against his loving family. She manipulated a confused, dying man into signing away $10 million. He pointed at me. His finger was an accusation that hung in the air. We asked the court to annul Article 19 of the will and to refer Miss James to the district attorney for criminal fraud charges. He called his witnesses. Doctors who had not seen Graham in years testified that stroke victims often suffered from suggestibility. A forensic accountant testified that $10 million was an abnormal amount for a caregiver. Then, Sterling smiled. A shark's smile. "I call Mark James to the stand." My father stood up. He walked to the witness box. He swore to tell the truth. He sat down and finally looked at me. There was no love in his eyes, only a dull, defensive greed. "Mr. James," Sterling asked, "can you tell the court about your daughter's relationship with money?" Mark cleared his throat. "Savannah has always been greedy," he said. The lie slid out of his mouth easily. "She was always asking us for money. She got into some trouble with bad loans a few years back. $60,000. We tried to help her, but she just kept digging a deeper hole." I gripped the table edge until my knuckles turned white. He was rewriting history. He was taking the debt he forced on me and pinning it to my chest. Sterling nodded sympathetically. "And when you won the lottery recently, did she contact you?" "Yes," Mark said. "She came to our house. She caused a scene. She demanded we pay off her debts. When we refused, she screamed at us. She told us she would find money somewhere else." A gasp went through the gallery. The press scribbled furiously. "So," Sterling concluded, "she was desperate for cash right before Mr. Halstead changed his will." "Yes," Mark said. "She was desperate. Thank you." I watched my father step down. He walked back to his seat. receiving a nod of approval from Victor Halstead. They had bought him. The Halsteads had probably paid them a few $1,000s for that testimony, and that was all it took to sell me out. Jonah stood up. He did not pace. He did not shout. He walked to the podium and placed a single hard drive on the clerk's desk. "Your Honor," Jonah said, "the plaintiff paints a picture of a senile old man and a manipulative nurse. We would like to let Graham Halstead speak for himself." Jonah played the videos. The screens in the courtroom flickered to life. Graham's face appeared, projected 10 feet tall. He was sitting in his study. He looked directly into the lens. "My name is Graham Halstead. Today is November 12th. I am recording this because my son, Victor, just left my house after asking me if I plan to die before the fiscal year ends for tax purposes." The courtroom tittered. Victor turned a shade of beet red. "I am of sound mind." Graham continued on the screen. "I know exactly what I'm doing. I am leaving $10 million to Savannah James. Not because she asked. She never asked. I am leaving it to her because she is the only person in this world who does not look at me and see a dollar sign." Jonah played another clip. This one was Graham talking to his doctor. "Doc, tell the camera, what is my cognitive score?" "It is 28 out of 30. Mr. Halstead." The doctor's voice replied, "You are sharp as a tack." "Hear that?" Victor Graham said to the camera. Grinning wicked, "I am not crazy. I just do not like you." Laughter rippled through the room. Judge Cortez hid a smile behind her hand. The narrative of the frail, confused old man was crumbling frame by frame. But Sterling was not done. He stood up on redirect. "Videos can be staged," he argued. "This does not prove she did not pressure him behind the scenes. It does not explain why she isolated him." Jonah looked at the judge. "Your Honor, the defense calls Mrs. Clara Higgins to the stand." A murmur went through the Halstead table. They did not know this name. An elderly woman walked in. She was wearing a nursing uniform. She walked with a cane, but her steps were firm. "Mrs. Higgins," Jonah said. "Who are you?" "I was Mr. Halstead's private nurse for 5 years, before Savannah came," she said. "And why did you leave Mrs. Higgins looked at Victor and Serena. Her gaze was withering. "I left because I could not stand to watch the neglect," she said clearly. "Objection," Sterling shouted. "Overruled." The judge said, "Continue." Mrs. Higgins took a deep breath. "Mr. Halstead would get pneumonia. He would get infections. I would call Victor. I would call Serena. I would leave messages begging them to visit, to bring him comfort. They never came. Not once in 5 years. They only came on his birthday to take photos for the press. Savannah was the only one who slept in the chair next to his bed when he was sick. She was the family. They were just the heirs." Serena looked down at her lap, her face pale. The image of the loving family was shattered. But Jonah had one final blow, and this one was for me. "Your Honor," Jonah said, "I have one final piece of evidence. It goes to the character of the defendant and the true nature of her relationship with her parents." He projected a document onto the screen. It was a bank statement, a wire transfer. My eyes widened. I recognized the account number. It was Graham's private discretionary fund. Date 1 year ago. Amount $62,400. Recipient, a collection agency in Las Cruces. I stared at the screen. The room spun. Jonah spoke, his voice gentle. "Your Honor, this document shows that 12 months ago, Graham Halstead anonymously paid off the entire principal of the debt Savannah James owed. He did it to free her." I gasped. My hand flew to my mouth. He paid it. He paid it a year ago. But I had been paying interest all year. Mark and Denise had been calling me every month, screaming that the sharks were at the door. Jonah turned to Mark James, who was now sweating profusely in the gallery. "Mr. James?" Jonah asked, looking over the railing. "If Mr. Halstead paid the debt a year ago, why were you still collecting money from your daughter every month?" The courtroom went deadly silent. Every eye turned to Mark and Denise. Mark stood up. "I did not know. The men, they said there were fees." "Liar," I screamed. I could not help it. I stood up. my chair clattering back. The judge banged her gavel, but I did not hear it. "You stole it," I screamed at them, tears streaming down my face. "Graham paid it off, and you kept taking my money. You kept me working 4 jobs for a debt that did not exist." Denise jumped up, her face twisted and ugly. "We have expenses. We had to eat. You ungrateful brat. We are your parents." "Order," Judge Cortez shouted. "Order in this court." But the dam had broken. Victor Halstead stood up, seizing the chaos. "You see," he yelled, pointing at my parents. "They are all grifters. The whole family is trash. They are fighting over the spoils." Mark turned on Victor. "Who are you calling trash? We won $4 million. We are rich. We just had a bad run at the tables. That is all." The room frozen. Mark covered his mouth, but it was too late. Jonah smiled, a cold, predatory smile. "A bad run at the tables," Jonah repeated. "So, Mr. James, you admit that you have already spent the lottery winnings. You admit that you are in financial trouble again. Is that why you agreed to testify against your daughter today? Did the Halsteads pay you to lie?" "No," Mark shouted. "I mean, they helped with travel. We spent it because it is our money," Denise shrieked. "We earned it." "You did not earn it," Victor shouted back. "You are a couple of hillbilly gamblers who blew a fortune in a month." The courtroom descended into absolute chaos. The Halsteads were screaming at my parents. My parents were screaming about their rights. The press was in a frenzy. I stood in the center of the storm, silent. I looked at the bank statement on the screen. Graham had tried to save me. He had tried to cut the cord a year ago. And when he realized that my parents were simply inventing new debts to keep me enslaved, he realized money was not enough. He had to give me the truth. He had to give me this moment. The judge slammed her gavel down with a crack that sounded like a gunshot. "Enough," Judge Cortez bellowed. "Everyone sit down. Now." The room fell silent, heavy with the panting breath of angry people. Judge Cortez looked at the Halsteads. She looked at Mark and Denise. She looked at me. "I have heard enough," she said. Her voice was ice. She picked up a file. "The plaintiff's claim of undue influence is entirely without merit. The evidence presented by Mr. Pierce, the videos, the medical records, and the testimony regarding the family's neglect is overwhelming. Graham Halstead was of sound mind. He knew exactly who his family was, and he knew exactly who Savannah James was." She looked at Victor. "Mr. Halstead, your father did not leave this money to Miss James because he was confused. He left it to her because she was the only one who deserved it." She turned to Mark and Denise. "And as for you two," she said, her lip curling in disgust, "may God have mercy on your souls for what you did to this young woman. If this were a criminal court, I would have you in irons. Get out of my sight." She banged the gavel one last time. "The will is valid. The case is dismissed with prejudice. The plaintiff will pay all legal fees." Court is adjourned. For a second, nobody moved. Then, pandemonium. Reporters surged forward. Victor Halstead kicked a chair, cursing loudly as his lawyers tried to restrain him. Serena put her head in her hands and began to weep, not for her father, but for the money she had just lost. I looked at the gallery. Mark and Denise were standing there. Their faces were white as sheets. The $4 million was gone. The Halstead bribe was gone. And their ATM machine, their daughter, was gone. Savannah Denise cried out, reaching over the railing. "Savannah, wait, we did not know." "Let us explain." I looked at her. I looked at the woman who had birthed me, who had sold me, who had lied to me while I bled myself dry for her. I did not feel anger. I did not feel hate. I felt nothing. She was a stranger. I turned my back on her. "Thank you." "Jonah?" I said quietly. Jonah nodded, closing his briefcase. "You stood tall. Savannah, Graham would be proud." I walked down the center aisle. The bailiffs held back the press. "Miss James, how do you feel, Savannah? Are you going to sue your parents?" I walked past them. I walked past Victor, who spat a curse at my feet. I walked past my parents, who were now sobbing, realizing the gravity of their mistake. I pushed open the heavy double doors of the courthouse. The sun hit my face. It was bright, blindingly bright. The air smelled of desert dust and exhaust, but to me, it smelled like oxygen. I did not smile. I did not pump my fist in the air. I just took a deep breath. The storm was over. The wreckage was behind me. And for the first time in 31 years, the road ahead was completely, terrifyingly, wonderfully clear. It took 3 months for the money to clear probate and land in my account. $10 million. When the notification popped up on my banking app, I was sitting in my car eating a turkey sandwich. I stared at the number. It looked fake. It looked like a glitch in the Matrix. I took a bite of my sandwich, swallowed, and waited for the world to change colors or for confetti to fall from the sky. Nothing happened. The traffic light stayed red. The radio kept playing a commercial for car insurance. People think that kind of money turns you into a different person overnight. They think you immediately run to the Ferrari dealership or start looking for mansions with 11 bathrooms. I did not do any of that. I bought a house, yes, but it was not on a hill, and it did not have a gate. It was a single-story ranch house on the edge of Albuquerque, painted a soft sage green. It had a porch where I could sit and watch the rain. It had a kitchen with appliances that actually worked. It had a bedroom where the window locked properly. To me, that was luxury. I quit my job at the call center. Brightspan had already fired me. So that bridge was burned, and I did something I had wanted to do since I was 20. I leased a small storefront in a strip mall 3 blocks from my house. I painted the walls white. I put up sturdy workbenches. I bought the best soldering irons and diagnostic tools money could buy. I named it G.H. Fix-It, Graham Halstead. Technically, it was redundancy, but to me, it meant something else. It stood for the two sides of the man who saved me, the Graham who hummed country songs, and the Halstead who built an empire. I fixed computers for low-income families. I charged them for parts, and if they could not afford labor, I told them it was on the house. It was a bad business model, but I did not need to make a profit. I needed to make a life. The first few weeks were quiet. I would sit in my shop, the smell of warm electronics and solder filling the air, and I would feel a strange, vibrating silence in my chest. It was peace. I had spent 31 years running from an avalanche. Now, the snow had settled. I spent those first nights in my new house performing a ritual. I had requested copies of every single debt that had ever been in my name, the ones Graham had paid, the ones I had paid, and the ones that had mysteriously vanished after the trial. I sat on my living room floor with a heavy-duty shredder. One by one, I fed the ghosts into the machine: the $60,000 loan agreement with the forged signature, the credit card bill for Denise's wardrobe, the payday loan Mark took out for a sure thing at the track. The machine whirred and crunched. Zzzt. It was the most beautiful sound I had ever heard. With every sheet that turned into confetti, I felt a physical weight lifting off my shoulders. It was not just paper I was destroying. I was shredding the invisible umbilical cord that had pumped poison into my veins for 3 decades. I did not call Mark and Denise. I did not block their numbers. I simply changed mine. I did not drive past the old house. I did not ask the neighbors how they were doing. I assumed they were fine. They had $4 million. After all, even for them, blowing through that amount of money in 6 months seemed impossible. I was wrong. It was late October. The high desert autumn had arrived, bringing with it a chill that seeped into your bones and a sky that looked like bruised iron. It was raining that evening, a slow, miserable drizzle that tapped against my living room window like nervous fingers. I was sitting on my sofa, reading a book, The Old Man and the Sea. Naturally, when the doorbell rang, it was not a delivery. It was 8 o'clock at night. I frowned. I was not expecting anyone. I walked to the door and turned on the porch light. I looked through the peephole. My heart did not race. My hands did not shake. I felt a strange, cold detachment, as if I were looking at a photograph of strangers. Mark and Denise were standing on my porch. They looked like wet dogs. Mark was wearing a windbreaker that was 2 sizes too small. His face, once flush with the arrogance of new money, was gaunt and gray. His beard was overgrown, patchy, white stubble covering his cheeks. He was shivering. Denise was worse. She was wearing a trench coat that looked expensive but was stained with mud at the hem. Her blonde hair, usually teased and sprayed into a helmet of perfection, was plastered to her skull. Her mascara had run down her cheeks in black rivulets, making her look like a tragic clown. They were arguing with each other even as they stood there. Mark was gesturing wildly at the rain. Denise was sobbing. I unlocked the deadbolt. Click. I opened the door. The smell hit me first. Stale cigarette smoke, cheap liquor, damp wool. It was the smell of my childhood. Savannah Denise cried out. She did not wait for an invitation. She pushed past me, stumbling into the entryway, dripping water onto my clean hardwood floor. Mark followed her, looking over his shoulder as if he expected the police to be chasing them. Oh, thank God, Denise gasped, leaning against the wall. Thank God you are here. It is freezing out there. Look at this place. It is nice, small, but nice. I stood by the open door. I did not close it. What are you doing here? I asked. My voice was calm, steady. Mark turned to me. He looked angry, but it was a fragile, desperate anger. Is that how you greet your parents? He snapped. We have been driving for 3 hours. In this piece of junk rental car, we are starving. Do you have any food? Make your mother some tea. She is shaking. I did not move. I asked you a question. I said, how did you find me? The internet, Denise wailed. It was not hard. You registered your business. GH Fix-It. Really naming it after that old man. She peeled off her wet coat and threw it on my sofa. We need to talk. Savannah, she said, her voice shifting into that wheedling, manipulative tone I knew so well. We have had a run of bad luck. Bad luck, Mark grunted, pacing the room. It was not bad luck. It was fraud. We were scammed. We met this guy. Denise interrupted, her eyes wide and frantic. A developer. He said he had a project in Dubai. Triple returns in 6 months. We put in most of it. Most of it, I repeated. 3 million. Mark muttered. He looked at the floor. It was a sure thing. The paperwork looked real. And the rest I asked. Taxes, Denise shouted. The IRS took almost half right off the top. And then the house, we bought the house. But we took a mortgage because the rates were good. And then the bank called the loan. She grabbed my hand. Her fingers were ice cold and claw-like. They took it all. Savannah. The bank took the house yesterday. They kicked us out. We have nowhere to go. The truck is gone. The jewelry is pawned. We have nothing. I looked at her hand on mine. I remembered her hand on my shoulder 3 years ago, forcing me to sign the loan shark's paper. Children must be filial. I pulled my hand away. So you came here, I said. Of course we came here, Mark yelled. Where else would we go? You are our daughter, and you are sitting on a pile of cash. He walked up to me, getting in my face. He smelled of fear and aggression. You have $10 million, he hissed. 10 million. And you are living in this box. You need to step up. Savannah, you need to do your duty. My duty. I said, yes, Denise cried. We are family. Blood is thicker than water. Remember, you cannot let your parents sleep on the street. We just need a place to stay for a while, a few months, and maybe you can pay off the credit cards. Just the immediate ones. The collectors are calling every hour. She looked at me with those tear-filled eyes that used to work. Used to make me sell my blood plasma. Used to make me work until I fainted. You owe us, Mark growled. I raised you. I fed you. I put a roof over your head. Now it is your turn. You won the lottery because of that old man. But who kept you alive long enough to meet him, us? I looked at Mark. I looked at Denise. And for the first time in my life, looking at them did not hurt. It was like looking at a fire that had burned itself out. There was no heat, just ash. I remembered the hospital room. I remembered waiting for them to come. I remembered the party. From now on, we do not need your pennies. I remembered the empty house, the note on the table. Good luck. I remembered Graham's letter. Do not let them eat you. I took a deep breath. The air in the house felt clean. Despite their presence, I am not going to help you, I said. The silence that followed was absolute. What Denise whispered, I am not going to give you money. I said, I am not going to pay your debts, and you are not staying here. Not for a month. Not for a night. Denise's face crumpled. But why? You have so much. It is just a drop in the bucket for you. How can you be so cruel? Cruel, I asked. I walked over to the sofa and picked up Denise's wet coat. I held it out to her. Cruel is leaving your daughter to die in a hospital because you are too busy spending money. Cruel is forcing a 28-year-old to sign a loan shark agreement to save her father from his own vices. Cruel is throwing a party and kicking your child out because she asked for help with a debt she took on for you. You ungrateful little witch, Mark roared. He slammed his fist onto my coffee table. The wood cracked. Do not lecture me. I am your father. You exist because of me. No, I said. I exist in spite of you. I walked to the door and pulled it open wide. The rain was falling harder now, a curtain of gray in the night. I do not have parents, I said calmly. My parents died the day they drove away from that empty house and left me with $100,000 of debt and a note that said, good luck. That was a misunderstanding, Denise screamed. She was shaking now, her face twisting into a mask of ugly rage. We were stressed. We were moving. I looked at her. I have paid my debt to you. I said, I paid it in sweat. I paid it in blood. I paid it in years of my life that I will never get back. The ledger is closed. I pointed to the dark street. Leave. Mark's face turned purple. He stepped toward me, his hand raised. You think you can talk to me like that? He bellowed. I will sue you. I will go to the press. I will tell them you abandoned your elderly, sick parents. I will make sure everyone knows what a heartless monster you are. I did not flinch. I did not step back. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. I held it up. The screen glowed in the dim light. Go ahead, I said. Tell the press. Tell the judge. We already saw how that went in court. I tapped the screen. But right now, you are trespassing. This is my property. I am asking you to leave. If you do not walk out that door in the next 10 seconds, I am dialing 911, and I will tell them that 2 intruders have broken in and are threatening me. Mark froze. His hand hovered in the air. You wouldn't, he sneered. You wouldn't put your own father in jail. Try me, I said. I looked him in the eye. I channeled every ounce of Graham Halstead's steel. I let him see the hunter Graham had told me to become. Mark saw it. He saw the cold, hard wall where his daughter used to be. He lowered his hand. The fight drained out of him, replaced by a sudden, pathetic fear. He looked at the phone. He looked at me. Come on. Denise, he muttered. Let's go. She is crazy. She has lost her mind. Denise looked at me one last time. She did not look sad. She looked hateful. I hope you rot. She spat. I hope you die alone in this house with your money. You are no daughter of mine. I smiled. It was a small, sad smile. I know. I said, that is the best news I have heard all day. They walked out. They huddled together against the rain, trudging down the walkway to a battered sedan parked at the curb. They looked small. They looked ordinary. They were just 2 people who had made a lifetime of bad choices and were finally paying the bill. I watched them get into the car. I watched the taillights fade into the mist. I closed the door. Click. I locked the deadbolt. Thud. I leaned my back against the wood. I listened. Silence. But it was not the empty, lonely silence of the motel room. It was not the terrifying silence of the hospital. It was the silence of a fortress after the siege has broken. I slid down the door until I was sitting on the floor. I waited for the tears. I waited for the guilt. I waited for that old familiar voice in my head that said you are a bad daughter. It did not come. Instead, I felt a lightness spread through my chest. It was physical, like helium filling my lungs. The stone I had been carrying for 31 years, the stone labeled obligation, was gone. I had put it down, and I was never going to pick it up again. I stood up. I went to the kitchen and made myself a cup of tea. I drank it standing by the window, watching the rain wash the street clean. I did not sleep that night, not because I was upset, but because I felt too alive to close my eyes. At dawn, the rain stopped. The sky turned a pale, washed-out blue. I put on my coat. I grabbed my car keys. I drove out of the city, up into the hills north of Santa Fe. I drove to the private cemetery where the Halstead family plot was located. The gates were open. I walked up the grassy slope, my boots damp with dew. I found his grave. It was simple, a black marble slab. Graham Edward Halstead, 1942, 2024. He built things. I stood there for a long time. The wind whipped my hair across my face. Below me, the city was waking up. A grid of lights and movement. I did not bring expensive roses. I brought a handful of desert sage and wildflowers I had picked by the side of the road. I placed them on the cold stone. I sat down on the grass next to him. They came. Graham, I said aloud. My voice was snatched away by the wind. I told him about the visit. I told him about the threats. I told him about the phone call I almost made. And the one I didn't. You were right, I said. They tried to eat me. I traced the letters of his name with my finger, but they couldn't, because you gave me the teeth to bite back. I looked out at the horizon, where the sun was just starting to crest over the Sangre de Cristo Mountains, painting the world in gold and fire. I remembered the girl who used to eat instant noodles in the dark. I remembered the girl who signed the loan shark papers. I remembered the girl who thought she was worthless if she wasn't saving someone else. She was gone. She had died in that hospital room, and she had died again in that empty house. The woman sitting on the hill was someone else. I stood up. I brushed the dirt off my jeans. I am not angry anymore. Graham, I said, and I am not afraid. I touched the stone one last time. Today, for the first time, I chose myself. I turned around and walked back down the hill. I did not look back at the grave. I did not look back at the past. I got into my car. I put the key in the ignition. The engine purred to life. I had a shop to open. I had computers to fix. I had a life to live. The best revenge wasn't screaming. It wasn't suing. It wasn't hate. The best revenge was driving away, calm and whole, knowing that I finally belonged to no one but myself. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I would love to know where you are tuning in from. So please leave a comment below sharing your location and your thoughts on Savannah's journey. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to the Maya Revenge Stories channel, like this video, and hit that hype button to help this story reach more people who need to hear it.